Right, well, good morning, everybody. And I think the first item is apologies for absence. And so I think I'll hand over to Andrea just to go through the apologies and any changes.
Yeah, of course. So we have apologies from Councillor Lorraine Patrick and Councillor Andrew Gabel substituting for Lorraine. We have apologies from Councillor Dave Norman and Councillor Mark Hawthorne is substituting for Dave. We have apologies from Councillor David Gray from Tewkesbury Borough Council, and Councillor Rob Bird is substituting for him. There has also been a change of responsibilities for members at Stroud District Council. So Councillor Matty Ross has left the panel and Councillor Chris Brine is now representing Stroud District Council.
Okay, well, thank you, and welcome to Chris as a full member of the committee, and of course welcome to the 3 substitutes that we have for today. The next item is the minutes of the previous meeting. I do want to raise a slight issue in the minutes, which is on page 3. And in the discussion, it was about the courts, and we were told that Martin had written to Alex Chalk and was awaiting a reply. And the situation with the courts, just we spoke about a little bit, and the committee decided to write to Alex, albeit that he was a local MP, but he was Minister for Justice, and that was the reason, because he's Minister for Justice, that we wrote, because he's got responsibility for the courts. Whereas actually it's down here as Gloucestershire MPs. We did take account, I think, of the fact that we weren't meant to be lobbying, but it was our concern about crime and justice in the Gloucestershire area. And in fact, I think it was mentioned that, again, the county council had passed a motion asking for better court facilities a little while ago, but it was to write to Alex Chalk, and I did so. But if that could be just altered to reflect that change, I think that would be useful.
Can we just check that everybody on the panel is happy with that change? Everybody is nodding. Fine. Thank you.
That's fine, Colin. No one indicating to speak. You're muted, Colin.
Sorry. Those will get signed, however we do that these days, as a correct record. Thanks very much. We then go on to declarations of interests. Please make sure that somebody knows. And then just carrying on from that, I did write to Alex Chalk and recently got a reply. That has been forwarded to everybody, and you can see that they do. Alex was saying there is money there, and as soon as leases are completed, they would want to go ahead with a refurbishment. The leases, as it happens, are held by Gloucestershire County Council. So I've written to Steve Mawson to ask him how those negotiations are proceeding. Are we expecting those to be concluded anytime soon? How long have they been going on for, etc., so that the committee can see that things are moving on. I think the refurbishment begs a few questions. Will the refurbishment make the courts fit for the 21st century? Will they be DDA compliant? That sort of thing. And I'll be writing back just to clarify some of those those issues, and will he be consulting with judges and magistrates? Anyone want to make a comment on that? I've had a message that Martin can't hear me. I'm not sure what's happening there. Anyway,
should we just
Brian Tipper, I think, indicating.
We'll test Martin in a sec.
Okay, Brian.
I just want to ask it, as we always are done as councillors, that we get value for money, and to be honest with you, value for money for me would be the looking at the long term as well as the immediate short term. With these refurbishments, are we making the right decision?
Thank you, Brian. I can include that. Anyone else with any comments? Johnny, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, so morning all. Apologies, I lost connectivity right as you started speaking, and I've just spent the last 3 minutes shutting down and logging back in. So sorry if I've missed the last couple of minutes, and if I repeat anything that's just been said. Can I just check? We are now talking about the refurbishments to the courts. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, great. So the letter that we've had back from Alex Chalk, I mean, I've got like 7 questions about that because there aren't any details in it, right? So my and these are probably rhetorical, and it's not something for us to address now, but I'll just run through them just to explain my thinking here. So, any proposed refurbishment, will that make things fit for the 21st century, or is it just a patch job? We don't know. Will the courts be DDA compliant? We don't know. What provision will there be for safety for witnesses? What recourse will there be if it doesn't work? How much of the 48 million is going to be apportioned to Gloucestershire? It's a national amount, right? So how much is that going to come to Gloucestershire? Is that enough to make the changes that we need? Has there been a dialogue between national government and Gloucestershire to discuss how much is necessary? And you know, these are my concerns, because it seems to me, you know, it's nice that central government has doubled the funding. That is a good thing. It's good that Mr. Chalk wants to express his delight about that. But I would feel a lot more confident if there was something in the letter that said, we have determined that this is how much Gloucestershire courts will need for these following things, and therefore we're going to pay for them. Because I'm not an expert in court refurbishment. I have no idea how far £48 million goes, and I don't know which other courts around the country are going to get a share of that money. So ultimately, unless there's a high enough concentration of yeses to the questions that I've just listed, then the money will fail to to satisfy the delight that's been expressed about it. It just doesn't, you know, there's nothing in there for me. Here's my suggestion, basically, that we as a panel define what we consider to be acceptable and a fair time frame, and we revisit it in the future, and we decide now what will we do if we are unsatisfied by what happens, because ultimately, what is the point in having governance if we can't administer justice? And so, to be specific, I would like to propose that the panel agrees that we firstly we write back and say thanks for the letter, and also we agree that the Crown Court in Gloucester, the Magistrates Court in Cheltenham be compliant with the Disability Discrimination Act, and that facilities for victims, witnesses and jury members be properly modernised by the 1st of July 2021. That's 9 months' time. And if they're still not good by the 1st of October 2021, that we write to the Secretary of State. I think that's a fair response to this.
Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, who's that? Is that Ruth? Yeah, we can hear you, Ruth.
Right.
We can hear
just
you.
Wave if they can hear me? Okay. We can't hear anything from any of you, but you all look like you're on mute. Can somebody say something?
Yeah, I'm talking now. I'm talking right now. Can you see me, Ruth?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. I'm sorry about
Colin,
this.
We can't.
Sorry, Colin, just jumping in there into, and you know,
I'm going to come out. I'll try again.
Sympathise with what John is saying, but that's beyond the powers of the panel.
Yeah.
So the panel can't do that. But what I could suggest, it might be something that you want to take to your own councils, and you might want to do something there. But the panel itself can't actually do that.
Can I ask then? Because I mean, I've been on the panel for a few years, and I mean, I maybe I've missed a PDF somewhere that says what we can and can't do, but I don't know. Okay, and I don't know what is and what is not within our remit. And what I'm trying to do is find a solution to a problem, right? We're here. I understand that we are here to work with the Police and Crime Commission.
Right, how about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
You can hear me. I still can't hear you.
Yeah, we can hear you.
I don't know. I've never had this problem with WebEx before on calls with county. I don't know that it's us.
I think it is, Ruth. Everyone else is online.
I'm not quite sure what to do.
Okay,
Colin, do you want to give it 5 and we'll try and resolve this?
Yeah,
I'm really not sure about that,
But,
Simon. I'm having horrendous problems hearing or seeing
Okay, I'm going to
anybody
leave the
at this
meeting
meeting.
again. Bear with.
Simon, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Phil. Yeah,
I'm having horrendous problems here.
Turn your video off.
I've tried turning the video off, and it's not helping.
And to improve
I'll put it on again. I'll turn it off again. But it's not at a level where I can participate. That's for certain sure, from what I can't hear.
That would improve your bandwidth. That's what that would be.
Yeah, still not helping much, I'm afraid.
Because we can hear you.
Okay. I just want to...
Colin, but what the panel cannot do is lobby, and that's what you're asking the panel to do, and that's beyond the powers of the panel. You can take things forward yourself through your own councils, but the panel must not lobby. I think what you've done already is as much as you can reasonably do.
Okay. I think it's... I know Karen wants to come in, and I'll take... I've got Karen and Rob Bird showing. But what I want to do is I just wanted to report back what I'd heard from Alex. I think there are a number of questions which I just wanted to give the opportunity of other members of the panel who have seen the letter just to say what they think their issues are. And then I think afterwards we can look at another time maybe at the panel. But I think Simon's advice is that maybe the best way forward is taking this through different other councils, and then we can look at it like that. But I'll just hear from Karen, and then I'll hear from Rob. Karen.
Can I unplug this for a minute? Which is the charger?
What I'd just like to point out is we keep talking about the courts as the whole court state. We're talking about the criminal justice, the criminal court. I'm really concerned that we're getting caught up with the family court, which are very different. I did miss the beginning of the meeting because I had a few problems, and I was going to raise that as part of the agenda, but I would ask for us to reference the criminal courts, not the whole courts, because that is our sphere of influence as well, and the needs of the family court are very different.
Point taken, Karen. Rob?
Do you invite me to speak then? Yeah. Sorry. Well, I raised my hand initially when Councillor Brownstein was talking, and it was merely to make the point that Simon Harper made. And as far as I can see, this is beyond our remit. And can we move on, please?
Okay. We will do that. And is Ruth?
I think they might be there
online.
We can. We think we're back online now. Can you hear us, Colin?
Yeah, we can hear you, Martin. Can you hear us?
We can. Let's hope it stays that way.
Yeah, good. Okay. Okay. All right. That's
Thank
good.
you. Thank you, Martin. Martin, we're now going on to item 4, which is your report.
Okay. Colin, thank you. I'm very sorry for the IT problems. Not quite sure what they are. Can I start off by saying there are 6 of us in our boardroom here at Sabrina Centre. Cameras sometimes can be deceptive. We are well socially distanced by at least 1.5 meters, maybe 2 meters, I would think, in most cases, just to make that point. Is there anything in the opening remarks I should be aware of, Colin?
I'll just say that I reported that we had a letter back from Alex Chalk. A couple of members believe that there's some further questions. Simon Harper has explained that our powers, well, we don't have powers to lobby, and this might drift into lobbying if we're not careful, but did suggest that members may like to raise this as an issue with their own council at some point, and that's where we got to, and so we've left it for the time being.
Thank you very much, Colin, and also I've had contact from Alex Chalk as well, and we had a conversation on the same matter, which was helpful. Some good news there, I think. Okay, this is my update. It could be long, it could be short. I'll try to focus on a few issues that I think the panel may be interested in. I'll try not to be too lengthy. We can drill down on more of those things if necessary. But first of all, you will be aware that the 101999 system is a great concern to the public. So my office has been doing an extensive amount of work to understand the issues that take place there, and also to try to support the constabulary to make sure they provide the very best service to the public. It's certainly a frequent topic of conversation to myself and the Chief Constable, and I'm fully aware that he also is in constant dialogue with the people who deliver that service, and I with him as well. So there's good progress, I think, to improve the service there, but it's a complicated and ever-changing situation. From the work that my office have done with the control room team, and we sent 2 of our researchers across there to see firsthand what the situation was. We think that's what the public would expect of us. And I'm pleased to say they actually found the level of service and performance is generally good. And they know that because of the service they've been done with the public and the relatively few complaints that come in about the actual level of service. Now, members of the panel will be aware, as councillors and also as members of the panels, that most of the concerns are not about the quality of the service they receive when they do get through, but the actual delays in picking up calls from time to time. So that's really what we're sort of focusing our work on. But the actual satisfaction is actually as good as any by industry standards. But of course, we know we're not an industry, we're a public service. One thing that I think you may be interested in was that we discovered, and the Chief and I had discovered it at the same time, that 30 to 40% of all calls that we receive in the control room do not result in any police action. They are a range of issues which you do not actually require any police activity at all. We need to understand more about that. And you know, that there are a range of things. There are calls for other agencies, there are calls, general inquiries that aren't relating to policing. So we need to understand that. And I'll come on to how we may be able to do that in due course. Members may or may not be aware that the constabulary on average receives about 259 calls per day. 259 calls per day, and on average 550 101 calls per day. That is a high volume. If it was consistent throughout the day, it would be easier, but they come at random times, often very late into the evening, and when major incidents are happening, whatever those incidents happen to be. Secondly, during this period, the constabulary has developed nationally and locally what we call single online home. So now pretty much all reports and non-urgent matter can be reported online. This is a major step forward. It's something we've been working on over several years now. It's been introduced, the technology being made available on a force-by-force basis. We were one of the, I think, medium to last forces to get that. It went to the bigger forces first, but that's the big channel shift. And over the next several months, the constabulary and I will be promoting that online reporting of crime, non-emergency incidents to try to free up the control room for the really important 999 and time-critical things. I think that's great news, and it's well done to the police service nationally and locally for dealing with that. And over the next well, in a few months' time, we'll be going much further than that to try to take calls on different channels as well. So you hear me on Radio Gloucester this morning about COVID calls, imploring the public, yes, report if you want to do so, but please report it online. Otherwise, there is a danger they will be overwhelmed in that force control room. So we're grateful for that. We are investing in a new system because to bring different systems together. One of the things that my team reported back to me that within the control room, there were multiple systems that the control room operators had to deal with. So because of the investment we made last year, and members may recall, I said that we were making a fund available to Chief Constable to improve public contact. That has now been decided to spend a significant proportion about that on a customer relations system to work within the control room to help us better understand the demand in the control room. That will bring 17 systems together. Am I talking to myself now? Nope,
no,
sorry.
you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, all good, Martin. All good.
Good. Thank you very much. My screen went blank. I was going to start doing emails, but no, that's great to hear that. We also invest in technology to upgrade our storm system. That will bring us from the current system to what we call Storm MA, which will be able to link in with the emergency service public network, which will come online hopefully in the next 12 months, maybe longer. That is a Home Office project that is well overdue. It's a troubled project, but if it does come good, our technology will link with that. Therefore, again, increasing the capacity and the capability of the control room. August was an exceptionally busy month. Speaking to the Chief Constable, there's a range of issues what that might be. It could be the fact that the weather has been adverse in certain areas, certainly during those storms that we had. That was predictable demand. We knew the storms were coming, but it massively increased the amount of 101 calls and 999 calls that came in. And that they were actually primarily dealt with by the police, and there were calls to the police, which I'm not sure is what 101 was intended for, but there we are. So on 101, it's the improving situation. I think the public obviously are concerned when they have to wait, but the 101 is a non-emergency number. Performance-wise, I check with the chief list on a very regular basis. 999 calls in this county on average is 13 seconds before they are in contact with the police, and 71% within 10 seconds. It's a good service which the force and I expect the chief to always prioritise. 101 calls, the average time to respond to that is 217 seconds, with 58% answered within 120 seconds. Now, we did have some correspondence from a local MP on the quality of the 101 service, and the Chief Constable has replied to him comprehensively. So I think that's an improving picture. Moving on to a completely different subject, the county has been plagued, sadly, with horrific crime, dog thefts. You will be aware that in my policing crime plan, I made it absolutely clear to the constabulates under the compassionate approach strand of policing crime plan that the force must have a compassionate approach towards all animals, be they wild, domestic or whatever, or rural farm animals. Before the actual increase began, my office alerted the Chief Constable and his team that we could see this coming from horizon scanning that we had done. We saw the first theft take place in Longley, a tragic event, and myself and the Chief Constable took a personal interest in that to test the response of the police. I can't go into details of that response because that's an operational matter, but I was very satisfied with the way the force approached that, and even a lot of learning came from that. Because the force was on high alert and they knew that the Commissioner and the Chief Constable expect a very swift and very decisive response for all dog thefts, a huge amount of publicity was put out by the force, which not just because of what the constabulary did, but a member of the public witnessed a number of puppies being put into the back of the van in Cheltenham Kings in Cheltenham. Now, I'm not claiming that was as a result of what the OPCC did or what the chief did, because a huge amount of that would have been the general public who reported it on Facebook. And the moment that call came in, I am delighted to say the force sprang into action. It took it really seriously. And it resulted in arrest on the M6 going towards West Mercia's police district up towards probably the north of England. In that vehicle, they found scores of puppies, at least 40, maybe 50 puppies. Some of them a very, very young age, far younger than they should have been at before they were separated from their mothers. The person was arrested, the dogs were rescued. And when I mean rescued, the police in Gloucestershire coordinated that. Some of those puppies with blue lights in police cars were taken to the vets so they could be saved. So I'm hugely grateful for the police for doing that. I think it's a success of the policing crime plan. It is something that makes Gloucestershire unique. Maybe it's not unique, but certainly it's what we absolutely expect of our force, and I hope you would agree with that. The investigation is complex, and it shows the importance of interagency working. The inquiries that now are ongoing involve another force from another country, which I won't go into, but we're grateful for that, what they're doing over there. It involves work with the RSPCA, and it involves work with trading standards. And of course, you will know there have been other offences that have taken place, but let me assure you, because that's in the policing crime plan, I get reports of that on a daily basis, anything to do with criminality to animals. And I've been made aware this morning by text of a shocking event that's taken place in Kingsway, where a cat has been cruelly treated and died. And on my phone now, I have the reports for that, not the detail, and they're taking that incredibly seriously. Likewise for RTCs involving animals like on Mitchelhampton Common, which happened. So that's important. You would have noticed in the press, you may not have done, that we are about to submit a plan application for the refurbishment of Banfurlong. That's the constabulary's long-term operational base. It's been 50 years since it was built, and it's about time for a refresh. So we can share that with you, and please do comment on it if you want to do so. I've also taken on a national role for the APCC. That's the Association of Police and Crime Commissioners. I am the vice chair of that organisation, have been now for 3 years. And the role I've taken on is that for sustainability and environmental impact on policing. That was a portfolio, was added just this year. It was at my request, it had unanimous support. So you will be aware the constabulary is well advanced in its environmental credentials. We intend to advance that. We've begun serious work with the Southwest, because that's the region within we sit, on trying to link up our electric charging systems and our purchases of electric vehicles. And I will take that national as well. So I'm delighted to do that. It's just about getting underway, and I think it will be fantastic. Let's move on fairly briefly. I'll just do things briefly now. The panel will be aware, or should be aware, that there is a review of PCCs going to be taken by the Home Office right now. I'm on the advisory board of that, along with the other vice chair and the chair of the APCC. I think it's a very useful process. It will give some scrutiny to how we operate, but it's also, there is a review of the police and crime panels as well. And I will say, for one, that I've only been complimentary, that it should be retained, and as a perfectly reasonable way to hold me to account, or no, to scrutinise me in a, I think the legislation says, in a supportive and critical friend. Well, let's hope. So there we are. That will report in October, and I think that'll be quite interesting when that happens. Also, members will be aware, or should be aware, that I am chair of the Gloucestershire Criminal Justice Board. That gives me no powers at all whatsoever, but I call together all the local members of the Criminal Justice Service here in Gloucestershire, the courts, the defence, the CPS, all these people, and we meet during COVID every month. I'm afraid it's a deteriorating picture. In the Magistrates Court pre-COVID, we had around about 450 cases on the waiting list. It's now up to nearly 1,000. I expect it is 1,000 by this morning. It was 998 when I checked yesterday. That is a serious concern. So cases are being locked down in the Magistrates Court at the moment. Again, I take it very seriously. It is not my direct area of accountability, but I am doing everything I possibly can to try and unblock that logjam. But that's not all within my power or gift. I wish it was, but it isn't. Within the Crown Court, can I just say though, we are an outlier in that area. In the Southwest, that's, well, even Somerset, I think it's Wiltshire in our grouping for the criminal justice world. They saw a peak several months ago, and it's coming down. Gloucestershire saw a peak, and it's level. Not such a big peak, we're smaller. So we are an outlier in getting our cases through the Crown Court, to the Magistrates Court and to the Crown. Now, the reason for this is because of our estate. And I don't know if you've covered it before. There are some encouraging noises that our estate will be improved. I'm slightly sceptical, but I also hope that it will be the case. So we're not seeing that backlog. In the Crown Court, we have about the same number of cases waiting, 330 as we did pre-COVID. You say, why hasn't that gone up? It's because the cases are not finding their way through from the Magistrates Court to the Crown Court. So they don't actually arrive there, which is a big issue. It's having a major impact on the criminal justice team, for which the Chief Constable is responsible and for which I hold to account. And they are reporting that witnesses now are beginning to lose patience if you are a victim of domestic abuse, which will be prioritised. It will be prioritised, absolutely. You want your case to come to court quite quickly. Gloucester Crown Court can only handle, I believe, single defendant cases with very few witnesses because of its structure. So most of those I know are going to Bristol at the moment. I think they have 6 courtrooms open. We have one with very limited facilities. I'm not just really going over old ground for the sake of it and tell you how it is. And I'm also trying very hard to increase capacity in Gloucestershire in any way I can, being very, very constructive, I assure you, not critical. But I'm told the adaptations that they can put together in other areas, like the more modern courts, by moving furniture, making it more socially distanced, putting up perspex screens, cannot be done in Gloucester because of its listed status. So that's one for somebody else. That's for the court system to sort out. But I assure you of my absolute support to do that. And I am working on a range of initiatives with HMCTS. I spoke with the Minister, Chris Philp, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and he promised me an update on the Gloucester situation and the options I put to be supportive. So I could go on and on and on, but I don't think that would be helpful to you looking at the time. So there we are, Chair. Of course, the really important area is to talk about the refreshed police and crime plan, which my deputy will take you through. And very important to me, that was done in the light of COVID. In the light of the fact the election was delayed by 12 months, in the areas highlighted by the Black Lives Matter, the killing of George Floyd, and also in light of the learning from the Me Too movement. Now, they're not political movements in my mind. These are things we have to be aware of. So that's what we're doing. I am desperately hoping, going back to the criminal justice structure, is that we can have a decision around Cirencester Magistrates Court. I've offered that. I said this at the last panel to the Ministry of Justice, HMCTS. They've indicated they would like it. I'm not doing it on a commercial basis. I just want to unblock the system. So I'm very much hoping that we can get that operational fairly soon, but it's not my gift. That is in the gift of the Ministry of Justice and HMCTS. It would be fantastic, bearing in mind I offered it, I think, in May, and we're now into September, and it hasn't happened yet. But let's hope it will, because it will be the only court in this county which is compliant with the Equalities Act. And that's good news. Okay, Chair, anything else I can help you with?
It's fine as far as I'm concerned. I just want to know if anybody has any comments or questions they would want to ask. Mark, I see your hand is up.
Yep. Thank you for that. Thank you, Martin, for your report. I just wanted to go back to the 101 stats that you quoted earlier on. And I think I'm right in saying that you were saying that the average wait time for a 101 pickup is around 3.5 minutes, and 50% answered within 2 minutes. And I guess that led to 2 questions in my mind. Firstly, how does that compare with other forces? And secondly, what's the drop call rate on the 101 number?
Any particular force you wanted me to comment on? Because generally speaking, we compare well, but it's if you want to be a particular force or nationally.
I mean, certainly from a county council point of view, we would rank ourselves against comparable forces and have an idea of where we stand. I assume that's something that you guys do as well, and I wonder whether or not you had any data to show how you compare with neighbouring authorities of similar sizes.
Yeah. I can't give the very latest data. It's something has been checked. It's something I talked to Chief about. I think we're in the middle ground. We are not particularly good. We're not particularly bad. We sit along with other forces. I speak to other commissioners. I don't know a commissioner in the country who's reporting what the public would say would be a good performance around 101 on timeliness, not on quality. And when we began this work, my office looked around for the best practice. Could we copy with pride another force that's really cracked this? And we're sitting on an outlier, and we didn't find anything that suggests that we were doing anything wrong. We're pretty much a middle ground force on that, and there are no areas of great practice. Regards drop calls, it's a very good point. We don't know how many calls are dropped, and that's why we're introducing the customer relations software, which should be in by December at the very latest, because you don't know what demand you've missed. But anecdotally, people who get tired of 101, they have the option to report it online. If it's an emergency, they tend to revert to 999. But we're certainly not an outlier by any means. I could set a silly target, couldn't I? I could say it's all got to be answered within 1 minute or 2 minutes. I don't know anybody at PCC in the country would even think about doing that, because it would be madness. You'd have people that sat around all the time doing nothing. So I think we're good. It's an improving situation. The most important thing is that improvements are being made. It can go online. Now, what I do know is the history of 101, because I researched it, my team researched it. It was first meeting about 2007-8, and in 2010 it was decided it should be a non-emergency number for all local authority, police, etc. So all the demand went to one place, and it could be disseminated to other areas who could deal with it. Now, that was a casualty of austerity. The local authorities, I'm not making a personal point here, Mark, because I understand why they did it. Due to austerity, the police were left holding a 101 baby, because the others couldn't afford to do it. Now, the amount of demand that the police receive right now on 101 that should be directed to other agencies is becoming phenomenal. And I could quote you the recent events when we had those shocking storms, when the trees came down. Now, I had spoken to the force before all those calls came in to say, I assume you're prepared. It's going to be exceedingly busy tonight. Because actually, Mark, I saw a tweet from Gloucestershire County Council warning us that it was going to be exceptionally heavy rain and exceptionally heavy winds. And I was right. When I spoke to them during the storms, they said, yes, we are phenomenally busy. We're having multiple calls coming in on 101 and 999. And I have the figures here somewhere. I'm not quite sure where they are now, but it was exceptional, quite exceptional. But the police were attending pretty much all of those calls. Now, that can't be right. It can't be right.
Okay, thanks. I see that Colette, you've got your hand up, and I've noticed Brian is showing his hand, so I'll take Brian afterwards.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you, Colette. You're mute. Hang on. Oh,
yeah, you seem to have muted again, Colette. So if you could unmute.
Okay.
Hang on.
Thank
yeah, we
you.
can hear you now, Colette. Yeah, we can hear you.
Good morning, Martin. Martin, I had a sudden death at home in July, and I have to say we rang the 999 service, and within minutes the police were there, and followed by 2 ambulances. And I have to say the compassion of your officers was amazing. They stayed with me from 6:30 in the morning till 3 o'clock. And I just want to say, that is above and beyond duty. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm really very, very sorry for your loss. I did hear about it, and our condolences go out to you. But I am delighted to hear that. People often refer to my compassionate approach priority as something purely for our 4-legged or 2-legged winged people, but actually goes out for the whole of the way we want the constabulary to operate. It's traumatic for them, obviously very traumatic for you. So I'm very pleased to hear that, and I'll feed that back to the Chief Constable. Thank you.
Okay. Brian?
Thank you, Chair. I think Martin made a very good point just now about the number of calls that police are taking that really aren't their cause. So it does suggest to me that someone should be almost receiving the call, making an immediate assessment as to whether it is a police call or not. If it isn't, then the person should be directed to, with that person taking the call's experience, and it should be directed to either another number or online. That way you would save a lot of time and be able to, how can I put it, serve the calls that need attending to.
Brian, I think you're absolutely right. That's what we want to see. I've just got the figures during that recent storm, which I think about 2 o'clock, the county council warned us of, and we had our people on standby. We received 313 999 calls and 108 101 calls, and they came in very, very rapidly at a level that you could never, ever pick those calls up in the way you want to. So that was a level of demand. Also, those who follow Twitter will see the amount of police officers who were attending trees down. I noticed one where it was a firearms officer, an armed response vehicle went to a tree down. Another officer with a member of public was trying to clear the road with a small saw because it's blocking an access point. You know, I did also ask a question, and I asked my colleagues in the control room to just say how busy the fire control room were, because I think, you know, the fire and rescue service perhaps could pick up some of those calls. I was a little bit surprised that they're not operating out of water wells at the moment. There may be very good reasons for that. And I was a little bit disappointed to hear the response was given to one of the constabularies, control room people, from a fire person to say, we don't do trees. But your point is very well made, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, I can't see anybody else's hand raised. Just Colette, if you could you lower your hand? I think the next item, if there's no other raised hands, I can't see any. If we move on to the refresh police and crime plan.
So Martin, for this one, I'm going to put it on the screen. I'm going to share it on the screen. Would you like me to do that?
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, thank you very much indeed.
I'm going to have a go. All right. So bear with me. You can introduce it and just bear with me, okay. And I'll get there. All right.
Let me introduce it. Obviously, it's taken up a huge amount of our time to refresh the police and crime plan. The reason we did this was because the election was delayed by a year. I spoke to the police minister and said, "Well, are you therefore expecting us to refresh our police and crime plans by a year as well?" And he said, "Yes, we could, or we should do." So we decided to do that. But really, the primary reason was to recognise the impact of COVID-19, to reflect the equality and diversity issues that have been thrown up quite helpfully by the Black Lives Matters issue. And I stress I'm not referring to the political side of that. I'm certainly not supporting defunding the police, but certainly the impact of that, the killing of George Floyd, was pretty significant for policing and should be for the whole country. And also for the Me Too movement, the equality of women in policing and elsewhere. So those are the key motivators for doing it. If I hadn't have done it, we'd have been left without a police and crime plan, potentially for May next year, or certainly we wouldn't have had one. So there we are. A lot of thought has gone into this. It's a lot of work we've been doing anyway in my office, and I'm going to ask my deputy and my head of performance strategy to go through that with you, and then of course we'll take questions afterwards. Over to Chris. Thank you. We can't see you anyway, I don't think.
Oh. Morning, Chair. Morning, everybody. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Chris. Yeah.
Great.
If you prompt me, Chris, prompt me when you want me to move through it, okay?
I will. I'll prompt you now. Can you go to the slide that says 6 priorities at the top, please?
There you go.
Thank you. So most of you will be aware we came to the police and crime panel, I think, at the back end of last year, where we talked about the kind of refresh of the plan at that stage. And that was to listen to what the public were telling Martin and the office and myself. And that was looking at things like rural and acquisitive crime. It was taking on Every Crime Matters and that mantra around burglary, because as we all know, over the last decade, the police, as we've talked about, and you've seen this many times, are taking on a lot of demand from other services and cuts elsewhere. So the mental health, missing people, and we'll come on to the non-crime demand later. But one of the things about this police and crime plan, this one in front of you today, and the one we talked about at the back end of last year, is a real focus on tackling crime and making sure that every contact with the police matters. So if you look at the 6 priorities, there's been a slight tweak. So the 6 priorities going forward are every contact counts, odour but not overlooked. Green and Pleasant County was an approach, but now it is a proper priority. Young people becoming adults, safe and social roads rather than safe and social driving, and safer days and nights. And as you can see with this chart here at the bottom, a lot of these priorities are cross-cutting. We want to link in with the child-friendly approach, which I know the County Council and other partners are signed up to, links to Safer Gloucestershire with the wider community safety and the issue of victims of crime. If you go to the next slide, please, Simon. One of the things that we've done, and we've changed it over the last 8 years, is how the priorities are kind of led. And one of the things I will say about this refresh is we've consulted quite widely with not only key stakeholders in terms of the police themselves, the priority leads, and others. We brought experts in to help us lead it because that's really, really important. So when it comes to the priorities, as you can see on this list, every contact counts, which is about every crime mattering. Martin will take a focus on this. This replaces the accountability and accessibility priority, but is a lot wider and really goes to the heart of the police and crime plan. This is about public contact. This is about making sure that, when you ring 999 or 101, that you're treated with, it could be the only time in your life you call the police, so it really does matter. And alongside that priority, I'm taking a lead for the office with regards to every victim matters, because we have what's called VCOP, which is about the police having to be compliant with certain things. There's lots of national work being done really well by the Victims Commissioner, Dame Vera Baird, who I've spoken with. So what does a service look like for victims? And that's one of the things we're working on with the Constabulary and partners. Safer days and nights. We've got a former Chief Inspector, Rich Burge. Rich Burge was, I think, a great find in terms of this priority. I would say that because I chose him on behalf of Martin. But Rich brings a wealth of experience after he retired as Chief Inspector, working with partnerships, especially in Gloucester, helping to set up Gloucester City Safe, which we think is a real asset to the city. Rich come on board, and he's, since COVID, one of the great things has been his contact with all the community safety partnerships in the districts and the city council and all the councils in the county in terms of the districts. He's made a real good contact with their community safety partnerships, and this priority for me is about community safety in its widest sense. So looking at antisocial behaviour, a county-wide approach, who can do what and how we do things, because there's lots of good pockets of activity. How do we make it better? So this is, I think, a really exciting opportunity, and building on the success of the city protection officers too in Gloucester. The next priority on the list is being led by Jane Dyer, young people becoming adults. Our previous lead, Kate Langley, used to work for the youth support team. Great amount of work done by Kate, Children's First initiative, diverting young people away from the criminal justice system work, because as we've talked about and Martin alluded to, it's taking 2 years, if not longer, for people to go through the courts. So is there a better way of doing it? And the Children's First priority has had some amazing success. We copied it from Surrey, where they've had some great success too. And the reoffending rate, I think, for Children's First was 13%, as opposed to the 50% reoffending rate we had from the Community Rehabilitation Company. And we all talked about the disaster that privatisation was. Jane Dyer brings a wealth of experience from young carers, Gloucestershire. She works now with Bridge Training. She will be a champion for young people, linking into the child-friendly agenda. Again, I think she'll be a great asset. Older but not overlooked. will be led by Phil Sullivan, and it has been since I think 2013 when Martin came in. Phil, former superintendent, massive wealth of experience, chair of the Neighbourhood Watch for the county, involved with the hate crime champion. Phil brings a really great skill set to this priority. GOPA, the Gloucestershire Older Persons Association, so he is second to none in this priority. Safe and social roads, acknowledging the fact that it's not just about driving. Nigel Lloyd-Jones is a whirlwind, and I hope you get a chance to meet him and present to the panel, because he has a great, not great, it's quite a sad backstory, but he helped set up the Gloucestershire Older People's Driving Network. And he set it up because his mum, sadly, was killed by his stepfather because he was driving and he shouldn't have been driving anymore. So Nigel's got a real passion. He comes from the motor industry, marketing. I hope you get to meet him because he's great, and that priority will really fly up, I hope. And then Green and Pleasant County. You know, as Martin said, as a force, we're leading the way when it comes to our green cars, electric vehicles. We're the only force in the country to have the ISO 1401 accreditation. There's lots more plans coming in the plan. I won't dwell too much because I need to go on to the priorities. But Simon, could you go to the next slide for me?
There you go, Chris.
So, thank you. I'll leave this one on the screen for you. But every crime matters. Every contact counts. You know, this is about a constabulary that is accessible and accountable to the public, because, as we said, every crime does matter. A recognition that every crime begins and ends in a neighbourhood. You'll remember that in 2016, when Martin got re-elected, in his manifesto was a commitment to bring back neighbourhood policing, one of the first in the country to go back to that kind of model. And I think you may have seen recently we've developed that even further, and I can say it now, that which will go on to the operating model later in the agenda. But I think that's a real investment in that kind of neighbourhood approach, dealing with community issues. One of the big things people have told us about, and we remember that Martin was the first PCC in the country to make cybercrime a policing priority. You'll have noticed it's not a single priority anymore, because for us as a force, it's business as usual. But one of the things that we put in the Every Crime Matters priority is a real look about the impact of fraud on our communities, internet, phone scams, a better way of confronting this. As Martin has said previously, this is one of those crimes that is really underreported nationally. Action fraud, there's been a lot of criticism actually nationally of the way it's done. So Martin and the Chief, a bit of a plan forward on that. And when we officially launch the plan in the coming weeks, a bit more meat on the bone on that one. A constabulary that's transparent, maintains a high level of trust with the public, a compassionate approach to how victims are dealt with, a commitment to partnership working, looking to reduce domestic abuse and sexual violence and supporting victims, a constabulary that strives to be equitable for all, acknowledges the inequalities that still exist in the county and the country and the communities that we serve, and an organisation that learns from its mistakes and is one that helps to deliver a proportionate level of support to the county to make sure we're kept safe. That's the Every Contact Counts and Every Crime Matters priority. Safer Days and Nights, as I talked about, for me is a really, really interesting one, because there is a lot of great activity within our county when it comes to community safety. Ruth and myself are quite passionate about this. I'm chair of Safer Gloucestershire, as you know. And it's been one, I think, with austerity, it fell off people's agenda because we were all so entrenched in what we had to do that, community safety did fall down the agenda. And I'm really pleased that over the last few years, it's back on the agenda, and over the coming months and hopefully years, we've got some really exciting projects in the pipeline. This is about the statutory, the voluntary and community groups working together. The constabulary will develop a plan in terms of the capacity, growing that capacity over the next few years. But that's not just about the police, that is working with partners. As I alluded to before, one of the great successes, I think, is the CPOs in Gloucester. That model is a model that we, with the City Council, good partnership working with businesses as well, diverts a lot of demand away from the police. And actually, maybe that could be replicated elsewhere across the county. Police in the nighttime economy, a big, big thing. The commitment by the OPCC and the constabulary commitment to 1% of the policing funding in our county will continue to go to the Commissioner's Fund, which works with the community and the voluntary and community sectors, again, is a real important thing. But the big part of the Safer Days and Nights is about maintaining that strong and, as I said, visible police presence in our communities. And that's the Safer Days and Nights priority. Can I go to the next one, please, Simon? I'm going to have a slurp of drink. Bear with me. Any questions so far? No, I'll carry on. Young people becoming adults. Martin made this a priority from day one. And I think in light of what we're seeing from the COVID pandemic and our young people, now more than ever, we don't want to lose a generation of young people. And this is about making sure that we have sensitive and relevant and effective policing. You know, this is about making sure that the police contact with young people is at its best. And that's building on the work that we've all been doing with regards to the adverse childhood experiences. And the county council have been done a lot of work with that, and we're very supportive of that work. And as I alluded to before, for me, the children's first agenda is one that, you know, we've really been passionate about, diverting young people away if possible, for the trivial offences anyway. And then the child-friendly agenda, you know, the Chief Constable and Martin are signed up to this. We have to. This is not about passing the next Ofsted inspection or the next HMIC FRS inspection. This is about having a vision for our young people in our county and making sure that they can be supported. So it's something we're passionate about, and Dame Janet Trotter, as you know, is leading on this on behalf of the county, really. And I know the Health and Wellbeing Board has signed up to it as well. So that's young people becoming adults, a commitment to a child-friendly approach. The next priority, please.
There you go, Chris.
Thank you. We changed this priority back in the last year to no one overlooked, really, to kind of reflect the fact that it was quite a broad priority, and we have changed it back, rightly so. But this priority does look at kind of vulnerable groups in our society, and it's about community resilience. I think recently we were praised by HMIC FRS with regards to this priority particularly, and the really good work between not only Phil as the lead for this, but the police lead, and also the work with our communities, because this is working to make sure some of our older communities, especially in rural areas, are really supported and they're resilient. I think is a real thing that underpins this priority. So for us, it's been a real important priority for Martin, and it will continue to be. And Phil is really great leading this one. And like I say, it's about community cohesion. I know you've got a lot on the agenda, so I don't want to go into too much detail, because some of it will be fleshed out in the coming weeks as we officially launch it. But we wanted to bring it to you first to kind of buy a bit of buy-in, really, because I know you're really supportive of the previous refresh back end of last year. The next one is safe and social roads. As I said, Nigel is a whirlwind, and I can't wait for you to meet him. But this is about, we've done some great work with regards to young people, thanks to the working with the Fire and Rescue Service. Thank you to them. Going into schools, some of the online materials, the What If program that I know thousands of young people every single year were going into schools. We've shown some of the dangers of driving. Interestingly, at the moment, in terms of the statistics, yes, Gloucestershire remains one of the safest places, and in terms of road casualties as well. But there's been an acknowledgement nationally that road safety and the issue of safe and social roads really is not in everybody's policing crime plans across the country. And it's a real gap. We've kind of forgotten about road safety because across the country, the number of deaths has gone down. But it's still a massive issue for us and for this county. And in fact, the numbers have slightly flipped a bit, and it's actually more older people who are being seriously injured or dying on our roads as opposed to younger people. I think it's quite close, but it's the older generation. So over the next couple of months, Nigel, working with the police and partners, will look to kind of develop this priority further, building on some of the great successes like the Pathfinder scheme, where Martin and I recently went to see them, and some of the young people learning how to drive safely. Working with Highways England, there's a real untapped resource there when it comes to using them and utilising their enforcement. We're really pleased with this priority so far, in the sense when Martin brought back the Triforce and the roads, dogs and firearms back into force. It's seen this priority being given an additional lease of life. So we're really pleased with where this priority is going. And finally, the last priority, please, Simon. Is a green and pleasant county. And, I don't know if any of you saw David Attenborough's programme this week. I think if you speak to young people, they talk about climate change. It's a big thing. And what we want is to make sure that the police, being one of the biggest employers in the county, plays its part. So I think as a force, we have a lot to be proud of. We're already leading the way nationally with this. As Martin's alluded to, he's taken on this national role with regards to the environment and sustainability. The building we're speaking to you in today at the Sabrina Centre, in the future, this building is going to be a kind of a model exemplar building. It's going to be an active building, you know, and the government are heavily involved in that as well. So we can be really proud that Gloucestershire on this priority is really leading the way. Electrification of the fleet, the biggest percentage in the country, you know, and then it also links to the recognition, as Martin said, about the compassionate approach. But also, you know, we've been praised by the NFU nationally for our approach to rural communities and tackling crime and disorder in our rural communities. One of the things in the last couple of years, as we've been able to invest more money, you know, for local taxation, and thank you to local taxpayers, we've invested in rural and environmental crime officers. We've got some best practice there working with the farmers and landowners in the county. And I think that's a real thing. We don't always celebrate things. We always pick up on the negative. And, you know, it's quite easy when a report comes out, you'll just pick up on one slight angle of it. And then that's the thing you'll do down Gloucestershire. Let's not do down Gloucestershire. We've got a really good story to tell. And I think, you know, making Green and Pleasant County and a compassionate approach, our rural communities, one of our key priorities, the 6 priorities, is really important going forward. I think that might be the end of the slide, Simon. Is that right? Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
As I said, we brought it to you. Thank you. We brought it to you out of courtesy, but also because we wanted to give you a quick highlight of where we are. And going forward, we're going to launch in the next couple of weeks the official plan. So there'll be a bit more information there. I gave you the highlights. I'm obviously not going to tell you everything just yet because I don't want to kind of spoil some of the surprises that we might have up our sleeves. But we would love it if you could endorse it because we do believe it's the right direction and it builds on the police and crime plan that we brought to you at the back end of last year, which I know you unanimously supported. So I'd welcome questions and obviously your support.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I can't see any hands raised.
We have got some, Colin. We've got Karen McEwen and Ray Brassington. And I'm just scrolling through to see if there's anyone else. Let me just have a...
I'll take Karen and then Ray.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Well, Chris, I want to ask you about the young people and adults. First of all, I'm really concerned about the data that you gave. I'm just getting this cup of coffee. I'm really concerned about the data that you gave because you compared the CRCs 50%. CRCs work with adults and are only adults who've already entered the criminal justice system. So you can't put that against 13% of young people under 18s reoffending. So what the data you gave us there was faulty, and please don't use that because it's apples and pears. But I'd also say that you're saying 13% is okay. But actually, I'd go back to Mark Hawthorne's question earlier about comparators, because I'm currently, you know, my professional background as a former HMI, and I also work with local authorities. I'm working with an inner city London authority at the moment, and their figures are 13%. So I'm slightly concerned that the picture on that, whether you've tested whether that's okay for Gloucestershire. The other issue that you haven't raised in there is the issue around CCE, child criminal exploitation, how you're working with that. So there's lots of soft stuff in there. And I can completely get that, though I do have a look at the HMIP inspection report from last year of the YOS, which gave your out-of-court work inadequate and 3 requires improvement. So that doesn't give me a lot of confidence. So I suppose I just feel confused with the comparative data you gave me, but also about whether you're taking a holistic picture that there may be young people who are having a bit of blow down the park who don't need to go through the criminal justice system, but we also will have, like every other area, children who are being groomed and being used for CCE, and that's not addressed.
Karen, I'll come back to that.
Chris answer that, yeah.
Karen, the police and crime plan provides the overarching strategy and vision. Levels about CSE completely. I mean, the hallmarks of the Cook County Force deals with that. I know full well the numbers of how many young people are on a list in our county. As a father,
not CSE, Chris. CCE. CCE. I'm talking about
CCE. I know the levels of that, but the reason it's not in the plan is because that's business as usual for the police. and it's operational detail. So it's not saying it's not a priority, far from it. But the policing crime plan has to give the overarching strategy and vision. Now, what we're aspiring to is that child-friendly vision of a county. And in terms of, you talked about the hour out-of-court disposal. Karen, it's not the police, it's the counties, not ours, the counties. And also, you talked about the detail in terms of the figures. I know exactly, but you talked about it being ours. Collectively, it's the counties. So let's be clear on that. In terms of the figures, I gave in terms of the CRC as an example. If you want to know the figures, then before Children's First, young people, we had a 40% reoffending rate for young people. 40% for young people. Children's First, it's now 13%. But I wanted to give the comparison in terms of how, the CRC hasn't been a success, and that whole process of the privatisation of probation, as we know, has been a national disaster. And what I'm saying is, actually, as a county, when it comes to young people, we've had a bit of a success here. So at 40% before we brought in Children's First, now it's 13%.
Sorry, Karen.
You're muted, Karen.
Can I ask you to have a look at that data to make sure it's secure? Because I've inspected across the country, and I've never seen, even in central London, reoffending rates of young people as 40%. If that is what you had, that is a real concern that it was ever at that level. Counting weights have changed over the counting levels have changed over the years, but I'm not sure whether that data is sound. And I speak from a very experienced professional background, so I'll ask you to look at that. But you also cannot compare children with adults, and CRCs worked with adults, and so you can't use that.
I accept that, Karen. I was just giving an example for you, just to kind of paint the picture. At the end of the day, you're a detailed person on this, and I get that. Other people may not be. So I was just saying, in terms of the wider picture, I wanted to talk about, how the CRC has that. Young people, we have 13% now. It was previously 40%. Level of detail, happy to give you that. We're confident in those details. But again, this is YST, Karen, as well. We've got a great partnership with them, but it's not from our office. It's it's based within the youth support team. So Karen McCarthy, the new person involved, that very good. I urge you to meet with her.
I'm not a detail. I want accurate information, Chris, but I'll leave it at that.
The next person I've got is Ray. And then I see Brian.
And Steve Robinson, Colin, as well.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That was an excellent presentation. And of course, you get my full support. The question I wanted to ask was in relation to safe and social roads. Does the force do anything regard noisy and illegal exhausts on road vehicles?
I've just spoken to Martin. That is an operational matter, but I can check if that's helpful.
Okay, thank you.
Right, as you know, it's certainly an offence under the Road Traffic Act 1972. That level of detail I don't have. I know that our special constabulary are very, very responsive to local concerns, but we could talk about that and find out. They certainly wouldn't be doing nothing about it. It became a massive nuisance. I've actually met with some people who have that concern, particularly with scrambler bikes, etc., going off road, and the police response has been quite substantial. So I know they do stuff. I'm not sure about it in your constituency area.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll take Brian next, and then after Brian, I'll take Steve.
Well, the only issue that I would like to raise, I've already done so by email to the police and to Martin's office, I should say, and that is with regard to a policy on parking. It mightn't be relevant at this point in time, but the whole point is it is a very social problem now with people parking on pavements. And I've said 50 years ago, I was told that parking on pavements was almost permissible, but not to the point of where a pavement is completely blocked. So I'm looking for the commissioner and the police to create a policy, and where a pavement is blocked that it becomes an offence. And so anyway, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Brian, you know I absolutely agree with you on that. A blocked pavement is a real antisocial thing to do, and the police will respond to it where it is absolutely blocked if they have the resources at that particular time to deal with it. You know, they obviously will prioritise a road traffic collision if that's the situation. And I've actually referred several cases recently to the constabulary, often reported on Twitter, and the response has been good. They've dished out a fair few number of tickets. I don't have the exact figures, so they do take it seriously. In Gloucestershire, pavement parking is a tricky one because it's a lovely ancient county with sometimes some very narrow roads and very limited pavements anyway, built for horse and carts or just perhaps even horses. So the government has actually now launched a national consultation on pavement parking. And this is really, it's for the police. I've encouraged the police to respond to that consultation. But we need to speak to our public as well. It's primarily a local authority or a county council issue, because pavement parking is a matter for them to decide whether they'd like Gloucestershire to take it on, to make it illegal to park on any pavements. But the reason I say we must talk to the public, because I know streets, if you don't park on the pavement, you block the entire road. You say, well, so be it. But then your house is an awful long way away from where you do need to park, and it's dangerous to children. So it's a difficult subject. Subject to availability, I'm sure the police would love to enforce people who block pavements, but I would encourage every district and the county council to make their position clear on pavement parking. I've made mine clear. We should enforce it where it's a blatant antisocial block. So I agree with you, Brian, but the police can't do that all on their own. There's far more of those civil protection people, parking wardens, whatever you call them, there are police PCSOs. I don't mean totality, but just doing one thing. So we should work together on that. Thank you, Brian.
Okay, thank you for that. Basically, all I'm asking for is a policy to be adopted, and once it's been adopted, that it is forced. And I will say it's got to be common to a rural and city, roadwork.
Chris?
Thank you. Just to go back for Karen, I've double-checked the figures for you. In 2018, in terms of young people and reoffending, the rate in Gloucestershire was 45%. Since the introduction of Children's First, we have a 13% reduction. We've got 13% rather is the figure of reoffending of young people. So it was 45% in 2018. It's now 13%. So I think it does reinforce my view that Children's First has been a success. So those are the figures we've got. Karen, if you want the details, I can try and get it sent to you.
Yeah, you might need to check whether you're counting the final warnings and refer other orders, because the counting rules changed.
Thank you, Karen. The most important thing is that we care about young people. You know, I think those figures are correct. My deputy will check them. But there's no doubt that scheme has been a successful scheme. It's diverted a lot of people away from criminality. We know once they move into the criminal justice system, it's very, very hard to get them out of it. We know that a lot of the wrong people are in prison, people with mental health issues. So with great, I can say it's the young person that counts, not whether it's 1% here or 1% there. And that is the ethos of young people become an adult priority.
Okay, I think I've got Steve Robinson, Vice Chair, next.
Can I ask that Ray lowers his hand as well? So, okay, Ray, could you lower your hand?
Right, thank you, Chair. I was going to speak on young people becoming adults, but I just wanted to mention, because Ray said about large exhausts and the noise. I have had tremendous support from Steve Lindsay in Nailsworth regarding that, and in fact, you know, these two vehicles were picked up for other things as well. So, you know, as Martin said, Steve Lindsay from the Specials, excellent guy, has picked that up and run with that. Just to go on to young people becoming adults, I was had the benefit of meeting Jane Dyer at Nailsworth Youth Centre. She came out to speak to the full-time youth worker and myself, and I found her very knowledgeable already, and she was very supportive of the work that we were doing. And I think, as Chris said, you know, it's a good find for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We always like getting good feedback. Steve Lindsay is an excellent Special Chief Inspector. He leads a team, a very, very good team of Special Constables who do a tremendous amount of unpaid work for this county. We made a decision, the Chief and I, that we would give them full support, the best kit, the same kit as the officers have, and we have quality, and maybe not the quantity we would like, but actually the quality is important. They get great training. They're often down here at the Sabrina Centre. They get full support from the constabulary and from me, and we would be lost without them, I'm afraid. They do a cracking job, so certainly on that kind of stuff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to need some help from Simon or someone else because I can't see any other hands.
No one else. No one else, Colin. No one else indicating.
Okay, so we'll move on. Just a very trivial point.
Colin, can I just raise one issue,
Martin?
It's important that the policing crime plan is something that the policing crime panel should have a view on. Chris has mentioned if you'd be happy to endorse the plan as a panel, we would be we'd be honoured, very grateful. But of course, it's not for you, Chair.
I hadn't forgotten that it would be good if it was endorsed. There's just one minor point which I'm sure is taken into account. On the safer roads, you talk about vehicles, so motorised vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists, excellent. And I'm sure with your focus on rural issues, that would include sort of horses as well.
Absolutely
I suppose it can't be an exhaustive list, but anyway, that's there. Can I just, I think we're going to have to do this just by waving hands and or whatever, but are members of the panel happy to endorse the refreshed plan? With some of the comments that have been made.
I'm getting quite a few signals that they are. It may be worth. We've got a number of people saying that they're waving their hands at the screen. It may be worth asking if there's anyone that would object.
Yeah, sorry, I just realised that's probably the easier way. Does anybody either object to the revised plan or is abstaining in that sense?
Chair, can I come in because I have got my hand up? It's Councillor Bird.
Yeah, come in, Rob.
Yeah, Rob. I do apologise. I can't. To start with, I could see people's hands being raised. I can't see that now.
So what we've got now, Colin, we've got Rob, we've got Karen McEwen, and we've got Mark Hawthorne. Okay.
My point, Chair, is that I thought from the presentation that we were told that this was, should we say, an initial overview of the plan and that there was more detail to come. So on that basis, I'm not sure that...
Sorry, who was... Yeah, Mark, go on. And then there's someone else. I've forgotten. Oh, Karen, after Mark.
Did you want to go to Chris just to come back on that, or Martin?
Well, I just wanted to echo the comment made by Rob. I don't think any of us could have any particular issues with the slides that we were presented with this morning, or the sentiments behind them. But I guess it's the detail that sits underneath that will be of more interest to us as members, and the metrics that will be used to measure the performance against those outcomes. And so I'm a bit blind on being able to endorse something that I think by Chris Briley's own admission is a draft, and there will be more content once the final version is published.
Just before I bring Karen in, I think what we can do, which might satisfy that, is that we approve the overall changes and kind of accept the direction of travel of the police and crime panel. I think some words along those lines might help. and so that we can look at the fuller plan at a later stage. But we've been told of the changes in direction, and if we're happy with those changes in direction, I think that's what we would be accepting.
Colin, is it helpful if I say to support in principle, subject to the panel receiving the full plan at a future meeting, and then it's properly agendaed and it's sent out with the papers so that members can look at it beforehand?
Sounds good to me.
I don't know if that's acceptable.
Karen? Just unmute, Karen.
You're still muted, Karen. Yeah, that's good.
Sorry. I'm afraid I'd have to abstain. I'm really not happy with the young people to adults, and I've taken the time to flick through another couple of police crime plans from other areas, and particularly from Hampshire, which Southampton has the child first principle also, and how their priority, particularly with a county where there's concerns about safeguarding anyway, and I don't feel that CCE, which is a developing area, is sufficiently targeted within that priority. So I will abstain.
I can see Brian's hand go up.
And Martin Smith, Andrew Gravels.
Shall I go first, Chair?
Brian.
All I suggest is that we, I think that we might be note the situation and wait, as someone said, for the fuller information to come later.
Martin?
Hello. Martin Smith, yeah.
I think it's all too easy to wave our hand and approve this thing. When people think of policing, they think of stopping crime and just how that happens. But what we're endorsing here is a whole concept about the ethos of how we approach the broader community and how we want to go forward in Gloucestershire. And for me, there is detail to work on, but the 6 principles are so powerful that I think it devalues them if we don't acknowledge our support of them about the ethos of the whole thing and where it's going.
Thank you. Andrew?
So I'm just trying to work. Yeah, I'm just trying to work out how to.
We can hear you, Andrew.
Substitute on this panel. So there's a lot of information there. It's been made very clear information required and because this panel. So I'm going to abstain.
Okay. In which case, I mean, are people happy that, and I can take abstentions, are people happy that we endorse the principles laid out in the Commissioner's presentation of the refreshed police and crime plan, and that we look forward to seeing the detail later? I think most people would be.
Colin, is it worth, because obviously we've got a range of views been expressed, shall I just go through everybody's name and they can say for, against or abstain? Is that worth doing? Because we're getting a range of views, I think, from people.
I think, yeah, we probably have to.
Yeah. So should we just make it clear what people are voting on? Are they voting to support the principles of the plan, but that's subject to seeing the detailed plan at a future meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone's comfortable with that. Okay. So I will go through everybody's name in turn. It won't necessarily be in alphabetical order. Could you just say for, against or abstain? And can I start with Mark Hawthorne?
Abstain.
Abstain. Thanks, Mark. Rob Bird.
On the principle that I've just outlined.
Abstain, you said, Rob.
Yeah. Mark. Simon, sorry.
Did you say abstain? I couldn't hear you then.
Simon, I said against.
Against. Okay. Apologies. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. Andrew Gravels.
Abstain.
Abstain. Steve Robinson.
4.
4. Brian Ticker. Brian, are you there? Not hearing you, Brian.
Abstain.
Abstain, Brian. Okay, got it. Ray Brassington. Is that 4, Ray?
4, yes.
4, thank you. Johnny Brownstein.
4.
4, thanks, Johnny. Philip Burford, you there, Philip?
Yes, Simon. 4.
4, thanks, Philip. Colette Finnegan, you there, Colette? Colette? Against. Karen Ewan.
Abstain.
Abstain, thanks, Karen. Martin Smith. 4, thanks, Martin. William Alexander.
4.
William?
4.
4, William. Have I got everyone? I'm just making sure I've actually got everyone. Am I missing anyone?
Yes, there's me.
Chris. Colin, it's you, Colin, and is it Chris's?
Yeah, and I'm
Chris
not
as
sure.
well.
Sorry, there's quite a bit of interference because of
could people mute if they're not speaking? That would be good. So before I come to you, Colin, I just wanted to make sure I got everyone. I don't think I've had Chris. So Chris Bryan, could you vote, please, Chris?
4. Yes, 4.
4, Chris.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you, Colin?
It's 4.
Okay, all right. Let me just top up the results. I think we've got everyone now. 8, 4. Just checking my figures. 2 against. And 4 abstentions. So it is carried, Colin.
Okay, that's good. There's 1 or 2 people who's just left their mics open. If
It's
you
better.
Could mute, that
It's
would
better
be...
now, Colin. Yeah, it's much better. Yeah.
So we move on to the next item, if that's okay.
Right, I introduce Chief Superintendent or Detective Chief Superintendent Richard Cooper, and he will take you through the refresh to the new operating model, or the new operating model. So I'm going to move so you can hear.
Richard, before you start, I'm just going to, or you can start, but I'm just going to share the screen, all right? So bear with me.
Thanks, Simon. If you could just put the title slide up, please.
Yeah, it'll just take me a sec. Hang on, just to get there.
That's fine. That's fine. The slides are not essential for what I'm going to say. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be quite succinct, not least because I know this is yours and the Commissioners' meeting and you've got a fair degree of business still to get through, and also this is something of a dry topic. So by the Forces Operation Model, we mean the method primarily by which the force is structured to deliver its business. And the last time we had a change of this sort was back in 2015. The model then was in essence born of austerity, and many of you will be familiar. So I'm not going to dwell on this enormously. Essentially, our uniform police functions, which we would categorise locally as officers responding to incidents, officers investigating crime, and officers dealing with neighbourhood problems and priorities, are dealt with thematically across the force. Could you go back one further side, Simon, please, just to the heading one? Thanks. Thank you. And we have been deliberate policing in the urban area, so we would describe that as Cheltenham and Gloucester from a response hub sited at Dunfermline. Those officers' remit is largely to respond to incidents as they occur, not exclusively emergencies by any means, deal with them to the best of their ability, and if there is an ongoing investigation that stems from that incident, or if there's an underlying neighbourhood issue that perhaps has caused it, then it would either be a local investigator or a neighbourhood officer or PCSO who pick up that ongoing response. In the rural environment, Again, there is officers whose primary function is to respond and deal with incidents, officers whose primary function is to investigate local volume crime, and officers whose primary function is to deal with neighbourhood issues. And those officers are stationed at the 4 rural areas of the county, albeit if you're a response officer at Stroud, your line management will go back to an inspector who is a response inspector, and then a superintendent whose responsibility is primarily around response. So it's thematic rather than geographic. The change we've made and are making at the moment is essentially to try and introduce a greater emphasis on localism and a greater emphasis on ownership. And we've already touched during the course of the meeting on the Chief Constable's belief that all crime begins and ends in a neighbourhood. And we are looking to try and introduce a greater sense of identity for local officers in terms of them associating themselves very closely with the area in which they are based. And then also a greater sense of ownership of resolving an incident or a crime from beginning to end, rather than it being passed on to a different part of the constabulary. So this change in part has been catalysed by the pandemic. Back in the middle of March, we were very quick to recognise the risk of having a highly centralised model, for example, with roughly half of our response officers operating out of Banfurlong, the impact on public service that could be brought about by a number of them working in the same place, falling ill at the same time or having to self-isolate. So to a certain extent, we decentralised lots of our resource in order to prevent the spread of the disease. Also, in expectation of a significantly increased call volume, which is what we found in relation to government guidance and people phoning the police to report concerns about social distancing or breaching of that guidance, we also became aware that we were likely, for a period of months, to have a lower crime investigation demand and a greater requirement to respond to calls from members of the public. So it made sense to devolve our specialist local investigation resource into a bigger pool of officers so that we were more resilient to deal with greater demand on our service. So what we are now moving towards is essentially making that approach our long-term approach going forward, whereby local officers associate themselves not with the urban environment or with response, but associate themselves as being a local police officer in Gloucester who are responsible for both responding to incidents involving the members of the public and then investigating crimes and carrying out inquiries relating to those incidents, led by sergeants, inspectors, chief inspector, and ultimately a superintendent who associate themselves with a geographic area of the county. So Simon, could you go on to the next slide, please? So hopefully you'll be able to see this on your screens. This gives a view of the operational leadership of the constabulary under the 2 assistant chief constables, one of whom, Rhiannon Kirk, is essentially responsible for local policing and contact, and Craig Holden, crime, justice and vulnerability. And the easiest way to point out and understand the change is to look at the 3 uniform superintendents in the bottom line there. So you have, working from left to right, Superintendent Jane Probert, who will be responsible for all elements of local policing affecting the Forest and Gloucester areas. Superintendent Emma Davies, carrying the same responsibilities for Cheltenham and Tewkesbury, and Superintendent Kath Davis in the middle, who will be the local policing commander for Cotswold and Stroud. And they will, rather than a superintendent being responsible for the response function across Gloucestershire, or as is recently the case, Detective Superintendent Steve Bean being responsible for all investigations of whatever type across Gloucestershire, they will be very clearly responsible for the delivery of local policing within those local areas. Hopefully, as local councillors and local leaders, you will be able to identify them as a regular point of contact, someone to raise concerns with, who have the relevant clout and position within the organisation to deal with some of those concerns, and also to provide very clear standards of leadership and expectations to officers and staff who are delivering policing within the areas they're responsible for. They will have a chief inspector working for them, and then a layer of policing resource below them to deliver policing within those areas. Can you just go on to the last slide, Simon, please? So this very straightforwardly shows the setup in each of the 3 local policing areas, each one led by a superintendent. They will have a chief inspector as their operational deputy. We operate a 5-shift system for the delivery of local policing, each of which will be led by an inspector. And just so this diagram here will effectively be replicated 3 times. So if we take Cotswold and Stroud as an example, 24/7 policing will be led by a shift inspector with a number of officers who identify themselves as a Cotswold officer or a Stroud officer, with a Cotswold or a Stroud sergeant working up to an inspector who's responsible for those areas, and ultimately a superintendent responsible for that wider local policing area. Each of the 3 areas will also have a detective inspector responsible for the management of crime standards in the area, setting expectations in relation to what we'd expect regarding investigative standards, monitoring crime levels, and applying more of a detective focus on the investigation of crime. But we are retaining, as a specialist function, what we have had for some time now in terms of 6 identifiable neighbourhood inspectors, each coterminous with a district area, responsible exclusively for the delivery of neighbourhood policing. And by neighbourhood policing, I mean the provision of non-response, proactive and preventative work to deal with either local issues that have happened already or getting ahead of local issues before they actually manifest themselves in local areas. So that is the model that's going to be adopted in each of the 3 local policing areas. In terms of the local neighbourhood inspectors, you shouldn't notice any difference. That resource is being protected. It is the blending of officers who previously identified themselves as either a response officer or a local investigator that is the biggest kind of structural change, together with the geographic ownership around Gloucester and Forest, Stroud and Cotswold, and Cheltenham and Tewkesbury. What I would hope is that we see a greater sense of ownership of issues amongst officers. There are relatively few things now, if I'm honest, reflecting on some of the conversations to date, where an officer can turn up, deal with an incident to everyone's satisfaction, and there is no ongoing work involved. Primarily, there's either investigation that needs to be carried out going forward, or there's some underlying community issue that plays into what is being reported. And so officers having a greater cradle-to-grave ownership of an incident, the crime inquiries that arise from it, and how it's resolved, I hope will give them greater satisfaction and resolve things to public satisfaction also. There will also be greater familiarity for our staff with their leaders, in that we are investing in more inspectors to provide better management of standards locally, and to be able to set that for their team rather than being spread across the force. And also importantly, because there will be senior leaders identified in 3 parts of the county, there will be greater opportunity, I hope, for partnership working at a local level. My area of business is primarily around serious crime and safeguarding and forensics. So those specialist services, the investigation of serious crime, safeguarding of children, child protection teams, the management of sex offenders, the investigation of rape and serious sexual offences, intelligence, counter-terrorism, our surveillance team, along with some of those specialist uniform services, such as road policing, police dogs, and the use of firearms. All those specialist provisions remain under central command. It's very much the provision of services that the public expect and have most interacted with, local police officers carrying out local functions, that are experiencing this change. So just to recap, 3 local policing areas with dedicated supervision, dedicated leadership, rather than the thematic model that we've had for some time. Thank you. Martin, you coming back? I'm happy to deal with any questions, things that I've not made.
Do those jointly. We can see our socially distanced, because the camera can somewhat lie. I just thank Richard for coming here. It's a courtesy. He's come before you to put the operational perspective. You'll be glad to know that I've been in consultation with the chief throughout the development of these plans. He's consulted me, but of course they are his decisions. He is the chief constable. I'm not, and it's important we know those differences. So I certainly endorse that. I also can report to you that this plan is very much lined up with a corporate narrative, which is what the chief constable prepares, and also very much lined up with the policing crime plan, which a majority of you have endorsed today. So I think it's good news. Any questions to me initially, because obviously you'll understand the panel is here to scrutinise and support me on my issues, not so much on the operation issues.
Okay. Can I take anyone with questions? And I'm going to have to ask Simon to let me know
so we've
whose
got
hand is raised.
Johnny Brownstein and Mark Hawthorne at the moment.
Okay, so Johnny and then Mark.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Richard, for the presentation there. I've just got two questions for you. The first one, I think this change in model will be popular with local residents, especially those residents who live in higher crime areas and therefore have more regular interaction with police. Seeing the same faces and building rapport is going to be good. I think locals will appreciate it. The question that you mentioned about partnership working, in my ward, we have a very active, very strong residents association. It's very good for the local officers to attend that and give a regular update, and they do their best to attend those frequently. So to what extent will that be encouraged or perhaps required of officers as part of this model? That's question one. Question two.
Should I take that now?
Yeah.
I can take that one now, actually. As I said, these were done in conjunction with each other, the policing crime plan and this one. At the beginning of COVID, or beginning of this year, the OPCC, under the Safer Days and Night, Richard Cooper, we attend all the district community safety partnerships. Richard Bird. So my office attend every single community safety partnership. They've reported back to me on the progress there, so that gives that support. We also increased their funding by £15,000 per year to reflect that change. So very much linked in with my office and the community safety work across the county. I know the chief's view on this, that when they can, they should attend, but they absolutely should be part of that neighbourhood. Whether they can get to every meeting or not, that wouldn't be his expectation, I think. But if they can, they should. But they must know their local councillor. They should know their local head teacher. These are my views, and I think the chief endorsed those. But Richard, did you want to add anything?
Only to say that I would hope and expect that regular engagement at the neighbourhood level should remain unaffected, and if anything, be reinforced. Because it's primarily the response to incidents and the investigation of ongoing crime that's structurally different. The neighbourhood effort is not being tinkered with to any extent.
And your second question, Johnny?
Yep, I think that's all very fair. And the second question is in line with structural changes. It seems with a change of process that officers may have a different change of responsibilities in terms of what they're practically required to do. Are all of the officers sufficiently trained in any of these changes? Is there a training requirement, and therefore is there an operational impact as a consequence of the changes?
Again, probably one for me. Richard commented once, he always can. Training of officers is essential. They all have to be highly trained for what they do. We're sat in our new training centre, and it's a busy place. So yes, they do need to be trained. It's a priority for the Chief Constable, I know. So yes, they do need to be appropriately changed. But I don't think the distinction between whether they're working out of Bound Furlong on a response team or whether they're working out of Cheltenham, Holland House on the response team is massively different. But to say we are delighted with this new facility, if training fell behind during COVID for obvious reasons, it's all hands to the pump. But yeah, they're pretty highly skilled these days. Did you want anything, Richard, or not really?
John, only to say it's a question of familiarity and mindset, I think, in that the same officers are largely going to be doing the same work, albeit previously they'd have considered themselves a local investigator or a local response officer. They have the relevant skills in the main. It's a question of mindset and expectation of them, and undoubtedly that's going to take some time to bed in. And we need to reinforce training because policing is only becoming more complicated. But I don't see a significant training deficit in terms of having an operational impact.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Colin, for that. I guess the question I'm left, having seen the diagram, is what it means for me as a ward councillor, and I'm sure that will be the same for councillors on this call today. And I guess that bit wasn't particularly clear, and maybe requires a little bit more of a diagram that shows it down to the grassroots levels, as I would see it. Because you make reference, I think, that the superintendent would be someone who would be visible to us within our communities. But looking at two of those areas, you've got Gloucester and Forest of Dean, which at its extremes goes from Sedbury to Hucklecote, which is a fair old geographical distance. And if you were looking at the Cotswolds and Stroud area, that takes you all the way from Mickleton down to Wootton. So I think what I'm looking for is a little bit of a more granular information that gives me reassurance, and I guess other councillors reassurance, about what the day-to-day relationship will be like and who will be visible to us and who we will be talking to on a regular basis. Because I'm not sure
thank you, Mark.
that I haven't quite finished. I'm not sure that the statement that the superintendent would be that visible person stands up to the scrutiny of the very large geographical areas that potentially face.
Yeah. Well, Mark, thank you for those comments. Well, bear them in mind. Having historically been one of those superintendents when we had the funds to put them in, there are ways of being visible without actually driving from A to B. It's a command role, and my guess is you would have access to those people, but I hope you have confidence in the PCs, the PCSOs, the inspectors, the sergeants, and all the police support staff as well. In your role as leader of the council, of course, we would speak to you about strategic matters.
If I could just offer one further thought, because I fulfilled a superintendent role for uniform policing when it was county, and it's a fair challenge, and I should have made myself clearer. I think primarily I refer to the visibility of the superintendent in terms of providing visible leadership to our staff. I concur with Martin's point that there is a point around visibility being not just about being in each of those geographic areas. At the moment, I think there's something of a void once you get past the neighbourhood inspector level in terms of geographic association, in terms of communication with the media, in terms of social media, police presence with a named senior individual. They tend to go from named inspector, who is an exceptional individual in Emma MacDonald in Gloucester, for example. If there's then contact about a specific local issue, it tends to go to a very senior level, to the Chief Constable's office perhaps, with no one really to grip things in between. And so when I talk about visibility in its loosest sense, I'm talking about ownership of issues locally rather than the superintendents being out, as you say, from Sudbury to the centre of Gloucester.
Okay. Is there anyone else? Simon, can you see
that?
Yes.
So we've got Councillor Steve Robinson.
Okay, I've got so Steve, if you could say what you want now, and then I noticed that Philip, you were waving your hand. So Philip.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was mentioned earlier that regarding response and officers following up, following along from that. I just wondered, with the public's expectations that all 999 calls will be answered as early and as quickly as possible, is there not a concern that if response officers are on follow-up, they won't be able to respond as quickly to 999 calls, and they may be calls not answered?
Again, I thankfully can draw from experience on this. And 999 is always a priority. When the police hear what the 999 call is and have confirmed that it requires an immediate response, the people will prioritise their workloads accordingly. They are very busy, but they are backed up by quite a support team. So I understand the issue, but this is quite a big improvement, which has been brought about by an increase in funding from two sources, one primarily from local taxation, and additionally we're very grateful to the government for the uplift programme, which will increase our establishment by 51. I think it's 15 so far come through that programme. We're ahead of schedule, not only on the uplift, we could go quicker, and we're also well ahead of schedule on the diversity aspect of it as well. So this is an improvement. We are still not back to the levels of officers and funding that we had back in 2010-11, but this is a great step forward. And, I am very grateful to the Chief. It is my job to hold him to account. He takes the risk. I support him strategically. But, this is a step in the right direction. It's quite a bold step to move to this model, because I was Commissioner when we reverted away from this, and that wasn't because we thought it was a great idea to reduce staff in numbers by that level. It's because we had to, and we were teed up for yet a whole load more cuts. So you know, this is a step in the right direction. It is not the holy grail yet, but you know, goodwill, and the government keeps its word. I think they will on the uplift. We keep and hold our nerve. We'll get back there.
Okay. Thank you, Martin. I just wanted confirmation that we weren't going to have more 99 calls unanswered. That was all. Thank you.
Well, we hope not.
Yeah.
Philip.
If I just, because a very busy operational police officer, as you just learned, he does need to leave at 12 o'clock. So he will not be moved at 12 o'clock on the dot. I know he will leave with your blessing, hopefully.
Okay, thanks, Colin.
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll keep this short then. I would say that my background's not in the police or social services circle in any way. I'm just a simple farmer, if you like, and I happen to be a local councillor. So I'm not looking at this from perhaps the same angle as many of the other people that have spoken on this subject. To me, the thing that matters more than anything else in the whole approach to police work and dealing with crime is the outcomes. And quite frankly, I'm not that interested in the process. What I want to be able to do is to go to one of my constituents who's got a problem that needs a police intervention and say, the outcome is going to be this because they've changed that. So thinking of the outcome, whether it's making a crime go away or dealing with it and getting the perpetrators locked up or whatever else can be done, I'm just really interested to know what these changes are going to do to improve the speed and effectiveness of outcomes, because in the end, that's what people out there really want.
Okay, Martin?
Well, it's a very good point. I think Philip's absolutely right. It is the outcome that is the most important thing. As I say, it's a step in the right direction. It doesn't magic up a whole load more officers, but it puts them more locally based. Certainly at the superintendent and chief inspector level and inspector level, I know it is the chief constable's expectation that they will get to know their local councillors, that they will manage their staff locally and they will meet local expectations. So if it's antisocial behaviour in the Forest of Dean or in Colford, which is a Forest of Dean, of course, or in the Cotswolds or Cheltenham, that they will get a grip of that. And I think that's what the chief superintendent is talking about. Now, it's not a magic bullet. I've now been around policing for 40 years, and we've been trying to meet public expectations all the way through with varying degrees of success. Times are still very, very tough for the police and for the community and for the public sector in general. But I think we will see an improvement, hopefully in reduced crime, which we have already, and hopefully it will be public satisfaction. But it would be great to have a great partnership with all the other people in those districts, which is probably the key to it. I mean, the public, not just the public sector, a really good understanding of the local schools and the problems that they have. Tricky with COVID, I know. A really good understanding of how the pubs are operating, the licensing, absolutely crucial. How you work with councillors. But I do ask you to, councillors, the respected councillors, that you manage the expectations of the public, because times are still tricky. And we may come on to it. You know, we're still in the middle of a pandemic and nowhere near the end of it. The officers are fatigued. You know, let's not forget that. And you know, the job they have to do is not a nice one when it comes to COVID. You know, I won't go into the gory detail. What they've had to deal with at the early stages of COVID was incredibly unpleasant, and no one's going to thank them for telling them they shouldn't be out with their children if they're 7 of them. But they'll do it. So thank you, Philip. You make a valid point, and I encourage you to get to know the local inspector, chief inspector, and superintendent, who are all good.
I had one point to that, and it will be the last thing I'm able to say, I'm afraid, before I have to go. And that is that the question of outcomes is absolutely the right one. It's also the one that's caused us the most difficulty. And you know, I echo Martin's request for candid conversation with the members of the public that you represent. You know, the outcomes for some people will be the presence of police to prevent crime, or the early intervention to prevent people becoming involved in crime or being victims of crime. The preferred outcomes for others will be that we get to things, be they incidents of crime, as quickly as possible. That could be a missing person. It could be getting someone out of danger following a mental health crisis. It could be responding to the latest laws around the COVID regulations, or it could be turning up to the scene of a road traffic collision or a crime. And for others, the outcome will be not so much how quickly we get there, but what the end result is, either in terms of diverting someone from the criminal justice system or securing a prosecution, sometimes for the most horrific offences involving children or serious sexual offences. The breadth of our mission is so great, and balancing the amount of resource available to those different outcomes, all of which are important. Of course, the answer is we have to try and do all of them, but the definition of outcomes vary for different people, and different people will expect different things of us. And it is an enduring challenge, and has been for the 22 years that I've been doing it, to try and to meet those very, very different expectations and outcomes. Sorry, that is something of a cop-out on which for me to depart, but I have to get to another matter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Simon, have you got any other raised hands?
Colette Finnegan has got a hand up.
Okay, so Colette next.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear
you. Can. Thank you.
It's for Martin, really. I'm sorry the other chap's gone now, but last about August time last year, we had antisocial behaviour in Abbeydale, and worked really well with Andy Doyle and Emma, your inspector, and the PCSOs, as well as Solis and Severn Trent. And we eradicated it in that time, so that was excellent. And again this year, we've worked with the same people in Abbeydale again during COVID, and the PCSOs, and it worked really well. And it worked really, really well because we know our team.
Yeah, and thank you so much. And one of the criticisms which you could level at the police, and I do, is that they tend to move their teams far too frequently. A lot of that will happen again, but it is very much trying to bring back that local presence that you speak of. We're determined to do that. And Solis is what a good organisation that's been. I think it began in Gloucester, it's now in Cheltenham as well. It brings together the antisocial behaviour response, which is multi-agency, often to do with housing, something to do with mental health, alcoholism, and the police quite rightly need to play a role in that. And I think at the last Police and Crime panel, that was raised an issue around Kingsholm, and I've looked into that in great detail. Shouldn't have to, but I did. And Solis was the glue that held all those agencies together, and I think everybody's happy with that outcome now. It was a shame, perhaps, that the police got the butt of the criticism rather than the other agencies, because I will support them when I feel I should do, and criticise them when I feel I should do as well. But that's a good example of a very complicated, wicked problem, which was resolved by multi-agency approach. So thank you, Claire, and I hope we can keep it that way in Abbeydale. I'm sure it'll raise its head at some point and we can stamp on it again.
Can I just come back?
Yeah.
Yes, do.
Yeah, just to say, the residents were very, very pleased with the input from the police. So that was really favourable in all areas.
Thank you. I'll pass that back to the chief. Did I say these kind of comments mean a huge amount to the police? As I say, I meet them on a regular basis. I meet PCSOs, chief constables, the whole lot, and they're a good bunch. And it doesn't take much to demoralise them after a long shift where they have been punched, spat at, been to an RTC, a burglary, and then been criticised at the end of the day. If criticism is justified, that's okay, but let's balance it with some support. They are tired. They're still fit and able. And that is one of the reasons why we're down at Sabrina Centre, because it's a beautiful location overlooking the Severn Estuary, because we're concerned about them. And, many of the Federation are concerned about them as well. They didn't get their leave during COVID. Some get it now. They went on to 12-hour shifts, doing some very unpleasant work. Now, I'm not going to compare that with the health service, who did amazing work as well. I think they're tired. But, as Jacob, no, I won't quote Jacob Rees-Mogg, carping on about crime rates doesn't particularly help.
Okay, thanks, Martin. Have I got anyone else wanting to speak?
Colin, yeah, Councillor Mark Hawthorne's got his hand up. So is Councillor Johnny Brownstein, sorry, Johnny, I think you just put yours down. That's fine. And Mark, you've lowered yours. So Colette, could you lower your hand? And Steve Robinson has still got your hand up.
Okay, so I've got no.
Okay, that's actually taken all the. I can't see anyone else. Okay, they've all lowered their hands.
Right.
Chair, would it be possible we could take a 5-minute or 10-minute break? Because some of my team would like to go and have a cup of coffee or something similar.
And I was going to suggest that one of the things on this plan, though, or on the reorganisation, I think it has been mentioned, but I think the communication strategy and particularly letting local councillors, not just county, but district councillors, parish councils know who the people are in their particular areas would be very useful, and maybe a quick note as to who to contact about what, what level would be useful. But I think
absolutely
that aside, it's 12, just gone 12 now.
Absolutely. On that point, we'll be doing that, as we will with the police and crime plan. We just need to get it officially launched next week. We invited you to the briefing. We invited the chair of community safety remit in the county council, and that's when everything will really start to kick off, I hope.
Okay, we'll take
a request from Richard. Richard also has appointments which he needs to go to. Can we take his agenda item on, what is it? The Chief Executive report next. I think it's going to be fairly brief, but he needs to get off shortly after the break, if that's possible.
We can do that, but we'll take.
Should we do 10 minutes, Colin?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to bring this item forward. It is a brief report this time. I trust that you've all read it. The only things I'd like to draw to your attention is item 4, is the extension of the term of appointment for the Chief Constable, Rod Hanson. The Police and Crime Commissioner has agreed to extend his current term of appointment by a further 3 years. So what that effect means is that his contract would have ended in 2022, and it's now going to end in 2025. And the Police and Crime Commissioner has based that decision on the very, very successful leadership that Rod brings to the constabulary. Very positive performance. And I think more than anything, it's about creating a sustainable approach to the leadership of the constabulary, which is really, really important in these current times. The item 5.
Just before you go forward, can I be advised? I'm grateful for it coming to the police and crime panel. Do we have to kind of endorse it as the appointment, or just note it?
It's just for noting, Chair. The appointment of the Chief Constable in the initial phase is through the Police and Crime Panel, who have the right to veto. This is for noting.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you want me to carry on with the report?
Yeah, sorry, carry on.
Thank you. Item 5 is about the police uplift programme. As you remember, the constabulary have been allocated 152 officers as part of the 20,000 officer national increase. We report back to the Home Office on a monthly basis. The progress in Gloucestershire is deemed as positive, and that we are on track to meet year 1 targets. Apart from that, there's nothing else of any significance from my report.
Okay, I've got a hand up that I can see from William Alexander.
If I may, Chair, may I just say that I fully support the extension of the Chief Constable's contract. He's done a superb job, and I think we'd be very silly to not support this extension. I approve wholeheartedly of this extension. Thank you.
Thank you, William. I think a number of us would feel the same. Simon, can you see any other hands?
Johnny Brownstein.
Johnny?
Thanks, Chair. Also fully endorse the extension of Rod's contract. That's great news. I just wanted to say that I thought the figures for BAME representation in the new offices are really encouraging, and that's really a positive thing. And a quick request for you, the report for the point 2.3 about kind of complex and what have you. it would be really useful if, rather than just showing the different categories at the moment, if there was some way of showing like a previous comparison of, maybe the same data for the same point last year, or an average over the past couple of years, just for context. That would be helpful. Just a request. Do feel free to take that one or leave it.
Okay, thank you. We'll take that away. Look.
Any other?
No other hands up that I can see at the moment. I'm just scrolling through. No one, Colin.
Okay, thanks very much.
You lower your hand, Johnny. Is that all right? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'll do that now.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That's really helpful. The next item was the mental health. It was the non-police activity.
Okay, Chair, I'll just turn the camera on in a second. I will pass those wishes back to the Chief Constable. I think it's a very positive development. But I'll pass you, turn the camera around now.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody. Just to say, this report comes back to you. If you remember, in October last year, we came to you with a bit of a collation of information with regards to mental health and kind of non-crime demand work. It's something that, as an office, we're acutely aware of, because when you speak to the public and the public call the police and they can't get hold of the police, or police can't come out because they're dealing with mental health or vulnerability. And I think if many of you watched the reported missing programme a couple of weeks ago, you'll see the immense demand pressures the force is under through dealing with kind of mental health and missing people. Just a bit anecdotal, I think what you've heard before. 10 people go missing a day in our county, and every missing person someone calls into the control room with regards to a missing person, it takes roughly 45 minutes per call for the call handler to log the details and action that missing person. And we did a bit of dip sampling in terms of call handling, and so many times there are examples of young people in care who go missing, and the care home or foster family call the police. It's 10 o'clock at night, 45 minutes later, the call handler's getting things sorted, and little Johnny or Isabella walks through the door. And it's that kind of demand. When 75% of the work of the police is non-crime demand, it gives people the real sense of the challenges. And the former policing minister, Nick Hurd, who Martin has had a lot of conversations with, and we're very highly rated policing minister, accepted that the police as a national system national service could not get back to where rightly the public's expectations are until the issue of mental health and vulnerability gets sorted. And at the beginning of this meeting, Martin talked a bit about the 101 call line and online reporting. He's written a blog on that. If you get the Gloucester Citizen or Echo today, or it's online, have a read of that, because I think for us that is one of the issues. How do we, and it's not just the police, it's not just our office, how do we collectively deal with that issue of non-crime demand? And this document really is a kind of a discussion document. So I'm not asking for you to kind of come back with anything immediately, but I think for us, this is going to go to people like Mary Hudson at the CCG. We've already had conversations with her and others, because when the storms hit, the demand, when missing people, there must be a better way of working. Now, Rich Cooper was here earlier talking about the operational model, and Rich spent 2 years in London. And he said there's discussions at the highest level in the Home Office that actually going forward there might have to be a kind of a blue light service to deal with mental health and vulnerability. So that's something we're acutely aware of on the national level. But on a real local level, in this report in front of you, on page 17 out of the 71 pages, gives you a real sense of some examples of best practice in the county. And that's not necessarily the police or other agencies. Some of that is the voluntary and community sector, who are really playing their part. I mean, Kingfisher Treasure Seekers in Gloucester, amazing work that they do, helping to deal with some of that demand. One of the things that this report didn't do, and we were a bit disappointed with it in the sense of it's still a work in progress, is a bit of a time in motion study about how does that demand impact on the availability of officers. So we know anecdotally that an officer, for example, probably back end of last year, was called to a house in Stroud. where there was a young lad, 12-year-old, with severe mental health issues, having a psychotic episode, locked himself in his room. His single mum didn't know what to do with him. He was ripping wires out of the wall, and the police officer, I think, was there for about 7 hours before we could get mental health support. Now, that is the reality of what the police are dealing with day in, day out. And when we have 10 missing people, if you've watched the Reported Missing programme, it sucks resources. So there needs to be a better way of working. I think locally we are doing some really good stuff. I mean, I think Ruth will come in this. Do you want to come in there, actually?
I was just to say that the original intention with the report, which was written by a local master's student at the University of Gloucestershire, was to do some time and motion analysis. We still want to do that, and as an office we will progress that, but unfortunately we weren't able to do it because this hit with COVID, and the student was unable to work from our stations and to collect that information. As we were sending people home, it wouldn't be right to bring her in, and we obviously can't send that information remotely to her to do that piece of work. But it is something that we aim to return to as an office, because I think that's, as Chris says, it's vital information that really just the numbers, the volumes don't tell the full picture when you've got officers that are dealing with one incident for the entire shift. Progress.
No, and I just think that for us is that it is work in progress. Nationally, it's an issue we all accept is huge. But it's something, please be reassured, as from the office of the PCC, you know, we're on it, we're working with partners. This report for us is a discussion document that we want to kind of take on. So there must be better ways of working that we can do within the current structures. You know, I have to praise actually the CCG locally. I mean, they fund a mental health triage car. We could probably do with 5 of them. We've got 1. But we're lucky that locally the CCG helped pay for it. But we need to look going forward about how we deal with this demand collectively, and not just the police or the OPCC. So I'll present this paper to you more as a nod to the fact that we talked about it previously, and also for further comment, maybe not now, but going forward in the future. But some of you are county council members, maybe this could go to HOSC. Where do you think we can take it? And please, you know, liaise with me outside of the meeting, but I will take any questions, me and Ruth, on the document itself.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Does anyone have any comments? I have a few. But
we've got Brian Tipper, we've got Karen McEwen and Colette Finnegan.
Okay, I'll take them in that order. Brian?
Well, taking into account the case of the mother with the son, and the son has locked himself into a bedroom, do we still use ISIS, the community charity that was very helpful to the police some years ago?
Chris, do you want to answer that?
I think that's the ISIS portrayed within the Nelson Trust, which is primarily for needy women. It's a women's centre. So I'm using all the wrong looks here, saying needy women. It's women who are suffering sexual and personal violence, so the answer is yes and no. It's not their primary level of work. This is quite clearly work for the social services department.
Okay, Karen.
I refer really back to my earlier comments. I was a bit concerned about your comments about looked after children going missing, that somehow or other that wasn't important, because that does fit very much with the CCE and the CSE agenda. And I did go back into the last Ofsted report. And
Karen, no, can I just call you out there, Karen? I didn't say it was unimportant. So I say it's time consuming, but don't, please, you know, it is. I'm saying, what is it the best use of police resource? Are the police the best people to deal with that? Answer, probably not. Please do not think I'm undermining it, because it's a huge issue and it's very, very.
I think the guidance is that, my colleagues from the county council will be able to say, is that carers have to report when children have been missing for a certain length of time, and the research is showing that a lot of those children are involved in CCE type activities. So there is a responsibility of the police in investigating those missing children. And the last Ofsted report, and I haven't managed to go through the monitoring reports, actually said that the response to looked after children missing was inconsistent and not thoroughly undertaken. So I just leave that on the table, really, that is really important. The other thing is the report doesn't reference the joint inspection of children mental health services by the criminal justice inspectorates, and it might well be worth a look at that and the findings of that as a way of going forward. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Comments duly noted.
Okay, and now I have Colette.
Colette did have a hand up. She's like, Karen, could you lower your hand? Is that all right? Sorry.
Yeah, now I've got my hand up.
Colette?
Yes, Simon, thank you. I'm really concerned, Chris. We haven't yet seen the impact of mental health following COVID. And may I ask, are there any talks in the other services to reduce you having to deal with so much mental health? Because I know in the past you've said it's 40% of your officers are dealing with mental health. But we know over the period of COVID that has gone up huge. And I do get very concerned that the police are dealing with mental health so much.
Thank you, Colette. And you're absolutely right. And actually, quite a lot of time during the kind of lockdown, Martin and myself were having regular updates and calls with people like Ingrid Barker at Gloucestershire Health and Care Services and Paul Roberts there, the operational officer, to talk about how we get upstream. I know the County Council are doing some good work on that as well in terms of some of their provisions. So I think there's a lot of good activity with regards to that. And, you know, picking up on Karen's point, yeah, you know, in terms of investigating the matters, yeah, the police have a role, but it's a partnership role as well. It's a really partnership role to deal with this.
Okay, anyone else?
Colin, may I just comment? I just wanted to draw the panel's attention to the fact that the Health Wellbeing Board meets next Tuesday, and it is actually looking at each of the priorities in the health and wellbeing strategy, of which obviously mental health is one. So if the panel members want, I will send you the link to those papers so you can actually see the activity that is going on, because all of these priorities are about a refresh, you know, and looking at the impact of COVID-19. So I will forward that to everybody if you wish.
Okay, that would be really useful to see what Health and Wellbeing Board are doing. And Martin, being on Health and Wellbeing, I presume you would be sharing this paper with them. And I think from another point of view, it's really useful information in there. It's quite packed. Far too much to go into a great deal of detail today. But there are two things. One, I think all councillors should be sent the link, because I think it's really useful information. And in particular, I think HOSC members and children and families members, because that impacts on those two areas quite largely. And then it would be up to them to decide whether to draw stuff out of that in the work that they're in their own work plans. If that's seen as acceptable, then that would be good. The other thing is this report comes to us, and there may be further work which talks about the actual impact in terms of response times. But it would be useful to know when we can revisit this, to know what kind of action is being taken, and that might be in 6 months, it might be a year's time, but I think we need to revisit it, because it's a big issue in terms of police time, and two, it's clearly a big issue in terms of mental health generally within the county. And just before I go, I do say that I think letting the cameras in to go through the whole process of a missing person in Gloucestershire did the constabulary no harm whatsoever. And I think one comment was, I thought the police just arrested people, but they were so good. I think that's it was just a comment from one of the people on the programme, and I think that's speaks volumes.
Thank you, Chair. Just to point out, this was a report done by a master's student in a university. It was a discussion paper. Was brought to this panel for courtesy, not to be shredded or commented on it in an aggressive way. It was a good piece of work by a student, and we do try to involve young people, students, to help us with that. We think that's part of the helping young people make that transition. So it's a good piece of work. You're quite right. It is a serious issue, missing people. I mean, make no mistake, the Chief Constable, who I hold to account, takes missing young people extremely seriously. We talk about it quite frequently, and you can see that from the reported missing programme. So I thank you for your comments on that. His operational response is a matter for him. It's for me to set the strategy and to hold him to account for it. So rest assured, Chair, we'll do that, and we will share that with you at the appropriate time. And the Health and Wellbeing Board is the place to take this as a discussion document, because I think everybody on this panel would agree the safety of our young people is very, very important. It's paramount. They are suffering disproportionately mental health following added to by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's why we refreshed the policing crime plan to acknowledge that. This is a very serious issue. But as I say, I met with Nick Hurd a long time, and nobody thinks that the police themselves can manage this problem. And having protocols to say, well, you must do this, you must do that, you must do that in a rigid sort of way, it is not the way to deal with young people or rookie problem. It's to get into a room, be it a Health and Wellbeing Board, and thrash this one out. Because believe you me, the amount of time that the police and the control room are spending dealing with an issue, which is partly their responsibility, the investigation. If you read my blog, when those calls come in, their role, is this a murder? Is this an abduction? Is this a mental health? Are they at risk of suicide? Have they just gone missing because they want to? They had an upset with their wife or their mother and dad. These are the issues they have to do. And once they've done that, they need to be able to categorise it and send it somewhere else. If it's a murder, abduction, a grooming, the police have a big responsibility. If it's because that child or person has got dementia, or because they've got a mental health issue, or they're feeling suicidal, the police aren't the best qualified people to deal with it. Just like they're not the best people to deal with the tree that's come down. Now, I'm going to be very firm about this. I am totally committed to working with everybody on these issues, because we must work as one county. And the final words, I think, in my executive summary, I'm not sure if they are or not, because it's been redrafted so many times, is we have to work as one, as a county. So a great discussion, and we'll continue it. Thank you so much.
Okay,
Colin, you've got Councillor Steve Robinson.
Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Colin. I think under Martin's budget that he brought to us, he did mention about the possibility of working with the health authority for another mental health car. Is that move forward? And following on from that as well, I see on page 12 of the report, it mentioned about the health teams, mental health teams finishing at 5 o'clock. When this has been talked on for years, and when are we going to actually, perhaps through HOSC, be talking about these groups working many more different hours and different shifts, so that it falls back on the mental health teams rather than the police? Is this being discussed at any time, please?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, regards to mental health card, yes, it's still out. That's my understanding. I've not heard it ceased. But I think I said this panel many times, as Chris did, we need more than one, because the demand for mental health care, it's not a police matter. The police have their role to play, and of course they do. They're there to protect life and keep people safe, but we probably need more of that. Now, we have had discussions with Mary Hutton in health, and very constructive discussions too, but of course I recognise they're under pressure as well, and I also recognise the county council, the districts are under pressure. That's why I work with them, and I enjoy a very good relationship with the districts and with the MPs, even though some say otherwise. I do very constructively, because this is all about keeping young people safe, and not just young people, but elderly people as well. So we should be doing this. We know that mental health is a real problem for the country right now, not just due to COVID, but it's been exacerbated by that. You know, I don't fall out with what the government is saying on this. So I think this is a challenge for the Health and Wellbeing Board, and also, you know, for the voluntary and community sector in this county, which are tremendous. I'm completely with you on that. And the police will do their part. And when I say I'm not trying to shift responsibilities to everybody else, I'm just making sure everybody does their part. But the police will not step back if life-threatening situations, if there's nobody else to take those reports, there's nobody else to take that report for that tree that's come down, nothing to do with the police at all. This is landed on somebody or the road's dangerous. We'll carry on doing it. But please help us, help them.
Okay, I don't see anyone else wanting to speak. Is that right, Simon? Simon, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Apologies, Colin. Yeah, I should know better. No, I can't see anyone else. Thank you.
Well, thank you. And actually, I suppose I'm not sure about others, but I think if you can pass a message back to the student at the university to say that was a comprehensive report, that would be good as well. I think the next item, is on safer streets and the application for grant for that. Do you want to just introduce that, Martin, or is it Chris?
No, happy to do so, Chair. This, I understand, was a request to go on the agenda by a member of the panel who's not here. Happy to take any questions on that that you may have. Of course, it's been in the press. Our MP, Mr. Graham, wrote, well, he didn't write to me, he put it on social media, and my office prepared a comprehensive response, which I think members have had circulated to them. So happy to answer any questions anybody has.
Anyone want to speak?
Councillor Mark Hawthorne.
Yeah, Mark.
Thank you, Chair, for that. I've got a number of questions, so I don't know how you want me to go through them. It's probably easier to go through them one at a time, if that's possible. But clearly, I don't want to curtail the opportunity for others to come in and ask questions as well.
Mark, if I think if you want, and you're putting one question at a time, or if two are very closely related, then maybe a couple. But I'll leave that up to you.
Okay, I'll do my best to keep the questions in chunks, Mr. Chairman. And if I see you pulling faces at me, I'll try harder. Martin, I just want to ask, obviously, just to try and get my head around the background to all of this. And I want to go back, I guess, to the end of last year, and 2 points particularly on this programme. Were you originally consulted on the criteria for the scheme? And I also understand that there was an opportunity for OPCC staff to go to a conference in January. And I wonder whether anyone from your office had gone to that conference to learn about what the criteria of the scheme would be.
Mark, I think it's fair to the other panel members to know that your political researcher has submitted a comprehensive FOI for all correspondence between me, my deputy, and the majority of my team regarding this. So you do know the answer to that question. You know that the criteria was discussed at an APCC conference. You maybe didn't know that. And I was at that meeting, and that was attended by the police minister. So, you know, we were involved to a degree. I had a view on that, which I think it's a meeting. I don't like to normally say what is said between the minister and myself. So that's the first thing. There was an APCC conference. It was in Manchester. That was one I was scheduled to go to. It also corresponded with an event that I was due to be at as well, which was the Police Reform and Transformation Board, which is the strategic board that looks at policing on a national level. I've been a member of that now for several years. The Police Reform and Transformational Board was cancelled on that day. So I made the strategic decision that it would not be appropriate, a good use of my time, to travel all the way to Manchester for a briefing. And actually that briefing, I know because I could see the papers afterwards, did not set out the criteria that we would be required to do to be successful in this particular issue. It was a good conference, and thankfully we've moved on. We can do things remotely now. That wasn't a remote conference you could do, but I'm aware what was said at it.
Thank you for that. Following on from that conference, I just want to get some clarification about the bill I'm trying to talk about now is whether or not you felt it was appropriate to make an application. And can you confirm that, certainly my understanding, that the Home Office provided you with details of areas in Gloucestershire that could be eligible for funding? Do you have a number in mind as to how many areas they thought were eligible?
Yes, again, Marcus, you know the answer to that because that was in our FIR request. I presume that your political researcher passed that back to you. I will answer the question, of course, because others not from your party may be disadvantaged, or you may not have actually shared it with others. The Home Office gave an indication as to what there may be possibilities where we could bid. They also made it crystal clear that we should not rely on their data. We should rely on, and we should not rely on UK data. We should use current police data, which is far more accurate, and we did not have the criteria for what we should apply for until a very late date. And being past the date when we actually got that criteria, we got the mechanism by which we could identify areas that would be eligible on the 24th of February 2020. I was inclined to bid for it. I hope we could bid for it. I was disappointed with the outcome.
Okay, and did you seek any sort of clarification from the constabularies to be whether or not they thought any parts of Gloucestershire were eligible for a bid?
Sorry, Mark, could you repeat the question? That was muffled.
Oh, sorry, I do apologise. If you can't hear it, do shake your head. I just wanted to seek clarification as to whether or not you asked the constabulary whether they thought there were any areas that would be eligible for a bid and what their reply was.
Well, again, Mark, you know the answer to these questions. I don't know why you want to repeat them here, but I will answer those questions. Of course I will. You know I consulted with the constabulary. At the earliest opportunity, I sent it across to the Chief Constable's office to ask them to take necessary work. It was given to the analysts within the constabulary to try to identify areas that may or may not apply to to fit the criteria. So yes, you know I did that. It was thorough, and you know other constabularies did. You may not actually. Yes, you do. You know other constabularies did similar work. My colleagues in Wiltshire did the same kind of stuff. We work very closely with Wiltshire, and it's very helpful.
So I guess just for the benefit of those who haven't possibly seen the emails in question, there's an email of the 10th of March which was sent to your office, which says, I was initially sceptical that we would have many qualifying areas, but it transpires we do in both urban and rural areas. On the basis of receiving that information and on the basis of the initial analysis by the Home Office that said that more than 60 areas in Gloucestershire could potentially meet the crime criteria, why was the decision taken by your office not to put in an application?
Mark, did I hear you correctly when you said 60 areas were potential?
I'm going on the information that your office has provided me through the Freedom of Information request, that the Home Office told your office on the 24th of February that more than 60 areas in Gloucestershire met the acquisitive crime criteria and over 80 met the burglary criteria. Given that, and the fact that you had an email on the 10th of March from the constabulary saying that it transpires we do in both urban and rural areas have many qualifying areas, why your office decided not to proceed with a bid?
Hang on. Oh. Can you hear me? You can hear me now? Good. Okay. First of all, there weren't 60 areas we could qualify for. The data the Home Office was referring to was 1819 data, not the current data. The Home Office made it perfectly clear we should not rely on their data. There most certainly were not 60 areas which we were eligible, and you're referring to different parts of a complicated bid structure. So whilst you might hit one criteria, you have to hit all the criteria to be successful. I think you must know that, Mark, because you've had a couple of days to read the FOIs, and I think you would come to that conclusion. We work with professional data, we work with professional analysts in this organisation, and we certainly did not think or believe there were 60 areas. Actually, I can categorically tell you that there are not.
Okay, so I think I understood that the correct answer to that.
I'm not sure you do. Can I help you with it if you're not sure?
No, I think I do understand the answer to your question. I think I just want to pick up on the issue, particularly of burglary, which I know that has exercised a number of residents and people I speak to on a regular basis. I just want to touch base on your understanding of where Gloucestershire stands on burglary rates within the southwest. What's your view of Gloucestershire's burglary rates when compared to the rest of the southwest?
Well, the first part of the question, we do take burglary very seriously. Of course we do. And it's a very funny way to look at data, to be perfectly honest, Mark, because I think you know that we don't compare ourselves with Avon and Somerset just because it's next door. And nobody else does either. The government don't. And we don't compare ourselves with Greater Manchester because it's next in the alphabetical list. The way that the government, and Quanta, and I think it may be the same for local authorities, requires us to present our data and compares us is with most similar groups and most similar forces. So I'm going to give you that data, and I'll give you that data as well. Now, I just need to check because okay, in Gloucester, which was where our MP made asked a lot of questions, there's 15 forces which are categorised by the Home Office, by the inspectors. It's been similar to Gloucester. And within that peer group, we are below the average for burglary. So I think that's good performance. I just need to check. These are the figures that HMIC refer to and Quanta and government refer to. We are below the average for burglaries for that. So that's the important data. I mean, you can pick another force and compare us to somewhere else, but it would not be appropriate to compare us, with some of the other areas. And we're actually well below on that. And even for the county of Gloucestershire, we are compared as a county with other similar counties. I mean, they're not going to compare us with Leeds, I'd be surprised, or West Yorkshire. But we are 5th out of 8 in that category. Just kind of which category, what our position is on the for Gloucester. Now we are, there's 15 in the group. And you know where we come? Yeah. We'll check that because I want to give you accurate figures.
But my question specifically, Martin, with the greatest respect, was about the southwest, because I'm aware that there are a number of constabularies in the southwest who were successful in applying for this funding. It's particularly in related to addressing burglary, which is one of the reasons that this scheme was designed. And I just wondered, given that they are successful authorities within the southwest that apply for this money on the basis of burglary, where you think Gloucestershire stands in relation to authorities in the southwest when it comes to burglary.
3 year round.
Yeah, fine. You'll know that there are 5 forces in the southwest. You'll also be aware that one of our close neighbours, Wiltshire, chose not to apply. Actually, they couldn't apply. In your FOI pack, which took one of my team here many hours to you could just ask for it, but we would have given that anyway. They set out the reasons why they felt they were not eligible. And we have a very good working relationship with Angus McPherson and his team, and throughout all of Wiltshire. And they spend a huge amount of time, as we did, trying to identify areas that would hit all the criteria. And you'll have it in your pack, which has been produced by our FOI, which says, despite all their work, and that includes Swindon, rural areas in Wiltshire, they cannot identify one area that fit the criteria. Now, I'm disappointed about that, Mark. I'm actually quite cross about it because you and I know how Gloucestershire is. We know how Wiltshire is. It's very disappointing that a criteria was set that meant my colleague, Angus McPherson in Wiltshire, and other colleagues could not qualify for this piece of work. Now, the answer is much deeper than that, and you know it is.
Well, yeah, okay. If you're not willing to, Colin, with the greatest respect, I think I want to pursue this particular line.
Okay.
And as someone who's been burgled twice in the last 18 months, I think I know the impact of burglary that has on someone's personal life. And Martin, you're not willing to say it, but Wiltshire has 30% less burglaries than we do, and we are in fact the worst level for residential burglaries in the southwest. And despite other authorities getting funding for burglaries as part of this fund, we didn't apply. Now, in your communications, you made it quite clear that Gloucestershire wasn't eligible, when it's quite clear from the papers that we've seen that your office and indeed the constabulary thought Gloucestershire was eligible. So do you think it was a mistake not to apply for some of this funding?
Mark, I know why you want to compare with the Southwest. You can do that, but government, HMIC and others all require us to compare with our most similar forces. So that's what I'll do. If you want to take it in a different direction, that's purely a matter for you. Now, there were areas we looked at in great detail. It was narrowed down to 2 areas, none in Gloucester. Narrowed down to 2 areas. And that was the view of professional analysts. And you may have professional analysts as well within your party or whatever. I don't know why you'd be doing that, but that's the situation. Now, what is really crucial here, what you've overlooked, is that last year, as a result of my police and crime plan, I think I reported this to the panel. Now, this is the first time you've appeared at this panel in 12 years, not 12 years, since 2012, is that we had a massive push on burglary last year. So we reduced burglary in the county by 25% last year, with an investment of £40,000 from my office and a tremendous amount of hard work from the constabulary, by 25% reduction in burglary, which outstrips any force in the southwest. Now, this is the sting in the tail. This is the sting in the tail. The Home Office criteria requires you to have 3 successive years of high crime. So a year ago, this commissioner, this chief constable, recognised there was a rising burglary trend across the county. We put huge efforts into it. And because we did, we're knocked off many areas. Now, that is the uncomfortable truth. And the other uncomfortable truth is, this is getting very party political, Mark. And let me tell you why. And let me tell the panel why. I'm not the only commissioner who didn't apply. The commissioner in Essex, a Conservative commissioner, a very fine commissioner, I know him well, didn't apply. There are 18 MPs in his area, including, check, some very, very prominent members of the government. In Wiltshire, the commissioner there, Conservative Angus McPherson, a good friend of mine. There are 6 MPs in his county, all Conservative. He didn't apply. In Warwickshire, next door to us, I don't know him so well, but he seems a very nice chap. There are 7, I believe, MPs, all Tory apart from 1. And so it goes on. How many people are so outraged as our MP and our councillors? There's nothing. Not a word. Not a word. Now, the decision I made, Mark, was well reasoned, well thought out, and it was the right decision based on the criteria and based on the circumstances that I faced in March and April. And I will come on to that. But this format is very clear. It's apolitical, and it's a matter for the chair whether he thinks you're going into political territory.
May I defend myself, Mr. Chair? I don't think I've made any reference to politics whatsoever. I'm here as a local councillor asking local questions regarding for what means a very personal issue. I can't, Colin, you're breaking up, sadly. You might switch your video off. You've also muted yourself, Colin.
I've unmuted myself now. Okay. Mark, you've asked a series of questions, and I understand, and I've given you a fair amount of latitude. And I've also allowed you to keep coming back on a number of questions. Now, I'll let you either say what you want to, or if you can make it a very succinct question that sort of wraps it up now, that would be useful. So I'm going to give you that chance now, and then I'll take anybody else who has any questions or comments. Okay?
Thank you, Chairman. I will ask just one more question and take your hint to use it as a wrapping up question, if I may. So I think I want to really repeat the question that I don't think you have answered, Martin. Given that Gloucestershire has one of the worst burglary rates in the southwest, given that the constabulary felt by their analysis in March that there were areas that Gloucestershire would be eligible for, given that the Home Office provided guidance indicating there were areas in Gloucestershire that would be eligible for, do you regret not putting a bid in?
I hope you were listening. I hope you've read the FOI papers that my office prepared for you, because it took them an awful long time. Now, you keep referring to the southwest. Let me just tell you, because my term of office is quite important. Since 2012, burglary in this county has reduced by 27.6%. 27.6% since I took office in 2012. The national decrease is 17.3%. The other point you're missing, and I'll bring it up in a minute in a more general point, is that there were two areas we considered may be appropriate, and they were put to me by my team and by the police. What you've omitted to say, which I guess is conveniently, about the ability that the police felt they had at that particular time to deliver on any application. And it was also the view that the chances of success in that bidding process were slim. Now, that is the reality. That is the reality. Now, whether or not the Home Office criteria was fully met by all people, I don't know. Another most similar force, I'm afraid it's not in the Southwest, Mark, but in our most similar forces, which is the appropriate way, and to do it just selectively for the Southwest is very disingenuous, was North Yorkshire. Again, Conservative Police and Crime Commission was a fellow board member of mine on the APCC. Their bid, and all this is in the media, included digging bunds to protect rural premises. And I assume that there is a figure put next to that. That wasn't in the press release they put out. Really, really good idea. In their bid, they kindly recognised the great work done by the Gloucestershire Rural Crime Team, who I believe now have delivered 25 miles, or it might be kilometres if we're going European, 25 miles of bunds across the county. And they quote the impact that has had on rural crimes of hair coursing, thefts, burglaries, and so on. Do you know how much this constabulary or the public purse had to pay for that, Mark? Nothing. So it's slightly strange, and yes, I am cross, that another force has had to put in a financial bid to do what this great county did for nothing. Now, I'm also going to ask my office just to share a slide. This is the bit that you've overlooked to say. And this is really, really important. Let's hope we can share it. Okay, can everybody see that? Hello?
Not yet, Martin.
No,
we haven't got it yet.
Okay, well, we're trying to share it.
You should be able to.
Yep.
Yeah, it's coming.
Good. I love technology. Okay. What you're seeing there must be true. It came from the Daily Mail. Been in there numerous times, and everyone's aware of that. Look at the dates on there of what was happening in this country at the time that Mark's referring to. Look at the comments in his FOI pack. What the constabulary said was their top priority at that particular time. Bearing in mind, this application, the final criteria came in very, very late. And most commissioners have said they're under huge pressure to try to do this in the timescale set by the Home Office. The actual time when you're referring to, Mark, we were facing a shocking national emergency, the biggest in my entire lifetime. The constabulary at that particular point were dispersing to all four corners of the estate to try to protect the organisation. They had told me they didn't have the capacity, even though they would do it if ordered by the chief, to undertake the additional work to put in a bid that might or might not have been successful. Probably wouldn't have been, but it might be. You're correct. It might have been. Any other time, I'm sure we would have said, drop what you're doing, do this. Now, you may not have been privy, I'm sure you were actually, to the briefings I was receiving of what COVID-19 was going to do to this nation in around about March, April this year. It was a lot worse than that graph shows. It was terrifying, and you know that. So I made a command decision, even though I'm not a commander, because I've been one. I gave the Chief Constable £1 million to say, you get on with COVID-19. You rally all the troops to protect the public. You do whatever it takes. And that's what he did. So I made that decision. It was the right decision. You may not like it. This is highly political, Mark, and you know it because no other MP, no other councillor, and no other police and crime has raised it. The difference is I'm an independent PCC. All the others are conservative, and they're fine people too. Now, what the force said, if he got the money, for at least 6 months, they wouldn't be able to deliver it because of their activity around COVID-19. Bearing in mind, they're all on 12-hour shifts now. They're decanting, and they don't know what's facing them. They're picking up dead bodies, Mark. And let's go a little bit further. Look into September. Our bid, the one they suggested, and it's all in your pack, was they would have to enter people's homes. Now, we're not going to tell you what they would have done or wouldn't have done, but they would have had to go into people's homes. And you know, they said to me, we really don't feel we can go into people's homes to deliver this particular tactic. And if you look what's happened on September the 16th, we're nearly back to where we were before. And I listened to the Health Secretary this morning, this is very dangerous. So we had received the money. I don't think we'd be delivering it, we'd be giving it back. Now, I made that decision. It was the right decision. I put the public first, and I included the impact of COVID-19. End of comment.
Okay.
Can I just very briefly come back on that one, if I may, Colin? Which is to say, I do believe Martin may be preaching at the wrong person when he's trying to talk about the huge amount of effort that's been going on with regards to COVID. I probably had slightly more to do with it than he has. But I am left with the last question, which is, if what he is putting forward is true and the pressures that he was facing as part of COVID was true, why does he think that 38 of the 42 police forces in England and Wales managed to submit a bid and he didn't?
Mark, the first thing I want to say,
just a minute.
If what I'm saying is true, Mark, what I'm saying is true.
Okay. On that point, I'm going to ask Simon, has anyone else got their hand raised?
Councillor Andrew Gravel.
I have to say, I have to say that sent to me privately are, 5 comments about this is overtly political and not helpful. It's very uncomfortable. So can we please try to make this less political and just factual questions if you have them? So, Andrew, you've indicated to speak.
Yeah, I have. Thank you. So, good afternoon, Colin, and good afternoon, Martin. I've listened. It's hard because I don't know if anybody else is getting feedback But I've listened very carefully to the points that Mr. Searle has been making in reply to Councillor Hawthorne, and to introduce politics into this session of this meeting. But that's Martin Searle. I listened extremely carefully to Mark's questions, and I thought they were measured and considered and delivered in a very calm way. If you think Councillor Hawthorne was being political, then occasionally drop by a county council meeting. You'll see then what is political, as Colin Hay will no doubt testify to. Towards the end of last year or earlier this year,
sorry, Andrew. I think you're on. We've got you on twice.
Okay.
So you're sounding like you're coming from somewhere else.
Maybe that's why I'm getting feedback.
Hang on. Yeah. Let me see if I can. I need to get rid of one of you. Okay. All right. I'm just gonna.
Okay.
All right. Bear
So
with
carry
me.
on now.
That should be better. Oh, he's gone altogether.
Carry on,
I
Andrew.
don't think there was a question there.
You there,
Anyway.
Andrew? Go
So do
on
you want me
now,
to
Andrew.
start
You're
again?
back. Yeah, go again. Go again, Andrew.
Well, because, well, I hope not. I'm back. Do you want me to start again? That I listened to. Some of you must have heard me, because I noticed when I spoke, Mr. Searle broke into a huge smile, because I was saying that I thought Councillor Hawthorne was being very measured and very considered in the way that he was putting his questions. And then I also said, if you thought he was being political, you ought to drop by into an occasional meeting of the full council of Gloucestershire County Council. And then I went on to start to say that towards the end of last year, or it might even be at the beginning of this year, at the request of many people in the Abbey Meads and Abbeydale area, which I represent on Gloucestershire County Council, along with the City MP, Richard Graham, I organised a meeting with local police officers so that they could explain to local residents in Abbey Meads and Abbeydale, just like those two areas were running at a level which was really concerning and frightening local people. And that is what we as elected members, Mr. Searle, are elected to do. Our postbag may not be as big as the city MPs or any other of the MPs in Gloucestershire, but believe you me, people these days, as you all know, find every possible way of contacting their locally elected officials, whether they're at parliamentary level or parish council level. And people were saying to me in my area, Andrew, why are there all these burglaries and attempted burglaries in this part of Gloucester? So we organised a meeting, and your team, Mr. Searle, came and spoke to us and answered a lot of questions, and questions also which the city MP put to them. So we're not being political. We're trying to understand why, when there was the possibility of securing government funding for the Safer Streets grant, it was taken up. People stop me when I'm out in the street, in a pub, in a supermarket, and say, why did that not happen? And so
okay.
I'm coming to the question.
Okay, quickly then, please.
I've just got one question that I want clarified. I didn't understand at all, Mr. Searle, the answer to your question when Councillor Hawthorne asked you if you were aware, if you were invited to comment on the criteria for the grant. I didn't understand the answer to your question. Were you or were you not? And if you were, what were your views on the criteria for those grants?
Actually, I'm going to invite Martin to answer that, but as short an answer as possible, please.
Okay, well, the first part was just a statement. We can replay this. You'll see I did answer the question. I'm sorry you missed it. You know that I spoke to the police minister about it. You know the police minister said this is not about making safe places safer. He said that to all commissioners. So yes, you had the answer to that. You know, I very much doubt everybody stops you in the street asking you, why didn't Mr. Searle put this bid in? Actually, it'd be helpful if you gave an honest reply, to be perfectly honest, because somebody wrote
just
to me.
answer my question. Just answer my question. Just answer my question. Not chucking it back to me.
So,
I'm going to ask you a question. This is really important.
Just a minute, Martin, please. I think you've answered the question, that he did speak to the police minister, and that does answer your question. He has said before the comments that he has made to them. So I am getting a lot of comments which are saying this is completely inappropriate. I don't think it is completely. I think, you know, it is right that we're asking Martin questions as to why he came to a decision that he's come to, which is why I thought it could go on the agenda. However, I think the way that the questions are being angled could be a little different. I am going to ask Simon, is there anyone else with their hand up? Because unfortunately I can't see.
No, only Mark from before. I think you've not lowered it, Mark.
Okay, well I'll take that as
I can't see anyone else. I'm just looking around people on the screen as well. No, I can't see anyone.
Simon, this is Rob Bird. I do have my hand up.
You did?
Okay. I'll hear from you, Rob, if you can.
Sorry, you've not popped up on mine. Go on, Rob.
Bear in mind what I said, please.
Of course. Thank you, Chair. Most kind. Hello, Martin. And can I just start by, I mean, you've just put up a short slide about the whole COVID emergency. And can I thank you and Chris for your contacts during that, certainly at the initial period, asking about how, you know, my thoughts about what was going on from a policing point of view in the area, etc., and in general, and I'm very grateful for that. You know, people have talked about the purpose of this panel, this meeting, and as I understand it, and I appreciate, I'm really coming in as a substitute here, but I'm here to represent the interests of the taxpayers in the borough of Tewkesbury. And this is, as I understand it, you know, the whole purpose of this is to talk about primarily finances and how they're used, because Martin, you have control of the taxpayers' money. And I'm just listening to all this and thinking there's a couple of things that I'd just like to ask, because I don't, you know, I'm not clear. And these are just very general questions, have the government set a deadline for this money to be used? That would be my first question. And secondly, you've referenced when you did your work in looking at how at areas of that might be eligible, and you've talked in particular about two areas. I apologise if I missed something. I wasn't quite clear about where those two areas might be. Could I just ask those two questions to start with, if that's okay, Chair?
Okay, Martin, I think it's in the pack. If you could just repeat what the date of the deadline for the work to be carried out was.
The work had to be. Sorry.
No, the two places in Cheltenham and Stroud.
The funding had to be spent and the work completed by the 31st of March 2021. I'm very disappointed that the COVID is going crazy again. It proves what the police said to be correct. The difficulty to enter people's homes would be very limited. That's the first thing. There were two areas which potentially could have secured funding. None were in Gloucester, one was in Cheltenham, one was in Stroud. And the pact that I presume the Conservative people have, it says, I'm not prepared to disclose that because the impact it would have on that particular neighbourhood. Nobody wants to be labelled a high crime area. That was something I made. You can laugh, Robert, but actually it has an impact on house prices, people's well-being, and that was something I said well before all this blew up. So that's the situation there. And Rob, the work you're referring to, or Councillor Bird, I think I'll say, was constabulary work, not my work. It was a joint effort by the police. The decision was made in conjunction with the force. We totally agreed it was the right decision. No other PCC has had this grief. I feel sorry for the one in Suffolk who's on a similar force. He put a bid in and he was turned down.
Okay, you said that. I've just seen that Brian wanted to say something.
Yeah,
can we try and wrap this up, please?
Chair, can I just come back very quickly, please? Because Martin, can I assure you, when you made that comment about nobody wants to be seen as a high crime area, I was smiling because it's true. Of course they don't. Nobody does. So I'm not sure why you picked me up on that. And Martin, thank you very much for your responses.
Thank you. Brian.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Martin, for your patience. But I'll try and keep this simple. And in my mind, I'm a retired businessman. The government were offering us money. The government actually indicated to us, I thought, about 80 instances where we might be eligible to claim for money. Somebody said we couldn't trust those figures, but it was the important issue. It was the government that was offering us the money, but we were told not to trust the government's figures. To me, being a businessman that I am or was, basically there was an opportunity to get money from the government, and we didn't take it. I'll just leave it with you on that one.
Actually, before you answer that, Martin, I think, Brian, it was the government that said don't trust those figures. Martin said that earlier. They said apparently these are some areas, but you need to apply your own judgment. And I think Martin's answered quite fully questions that have come before you about why he decided not to apply. So I think those questions have been answered. Now I'm trying to draw this to a conclusion, and I don't see any other hands up.
I can just help you slightly with that, Chair, and thank you for your intervention. What I failed to say, at that particular point in time, the graph, there were 26% abstraction rates from the constabulary. That's pretty much unheard of. So not only would I have had to ask the constabulary at a time of unbelievable pressure, they were 26% down on their resources at that particular time. The government weren't just offering money. There was a huge amount of work to be done. I made the judgment it was questionable whether or not we would get that funding. They didn't get it in Suffolk. They didn't get it in Gwent, I believe. And also, there are lots of other areas where similar forces, Wiltshire, I believe Warwickshire, Essex, who made the same judgment. Now, they weren't offering money like that. My priority number one is saving lives. Look at those graphs. That's where the police activity was focused, saving lives, not chasing money.
Actually, I'm going to stop you there because you're going over ground that you've already covered. I didn't see any hands up. I've not heard from Simon.
No more, Colin.
Okay, so I'm drawing that to a close, which I think was the last item, apart from the calendar of meetings.
Yeah, Colin, on that, can I just draw to members' attention and to Martin and the team there that we've got the 2021 dates confirmed now as well, so they're on the agenda. Okay.
All right. And with that, I will say thank you to everyone and our substitutes that came in. I'm sure you enjoyed yourselves. Sorry to others who, because I have had quite a number of comments from all parties to say that was probably just on the rather political side. I just leave it at that. Those were the comments. It's not mine. But I did think it was important that at least we had the opportunity to ask Martin why he did what he did. And I think I've done that. I think I've done it fairly. And with that, I will say cheerio to everyone and thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.